because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
And I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people. Those are stupid people that say that.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Friday, March 14th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to play that same clip to start again today because I kind of feel like today is an extension of yesterday's show. Now, I'm no matter what, going to be getting to the DOGE discussion that I said I was going to carry over today that we didn't get to yesterday. But I thought it was important just for the continuity of that conversation to discuss the developments of what happened since yesterday and just kind of to flush this conversation out even further. I mean, it's hard not to see this as one of the most important conversations, like as it pertains to American future rights of this country, really just kind of the understanding of free speech in the world. I mean, and not that just because what happens here will necessarily change everywhere else, but in a lot of conversations, we can acknowledge that at least the foundation of what this country was, if you're forced to live in a state of society, is, I argue, one of the best examples of something that can hold power at bay, at least for some time, because clearly we can see that it still falls to this point, in my opinion, every time in any situation where you have some kind of government that centralizes power. It's just what they do. But free speech is a foundational aspect of this conversation, of this country, of the belief structures, of at least the feigned belief structures of both sides of the paradigm. And what I think is so alarming about this conversation is it's not like, and I say this every time we have this conversation, I'll probably make the point 3 times today, which is that if we want to have an honest conversation, just acknowledge that you're fighting for limited speech and it's not right or wrong. It's an argument. We should have a conversation. All right. We should debate whether that is what it should, just a discussion. If you believe in that, lay out your facts. Lay out why you think it should be this way. Maybe terrorism, maybe national security, maybe because you feel like threatening words shouldn't be allowed. You know, whatever your argument is, lay it out, lay out why it should make sense, more so than accepting the dangers that might come by allowing free speech in an absolute sense. My point is that's not what's happening right now. There are some people that have that conversation, and at least I can argue they're at least honestly presenting what they think. But there's a very large, if not the majority of the Republican conversation right now that are simply just saying, no, that doesn't apply. This is not about free speech. That's not what this is, even though it's like the most textbook case of free speech suppression that I've seen doing this. In the context of actual, not just that they claim things or try to censor somebody on a platform, but government action and now potentially deporting somebody. I mean, my point is coming down to this. It's interesting that we went from free speech, at least the argument of that, to where now the very same people that were screaming about, rightly so, that this is a foundational important thing that we need to fight for, are in many cases acting like it doesn't apply. But if you were to put the definition before this about what we were fighting for, it's exactly what this is. This is a textbook case. And what they are pointing to, even the argument saying it's not about speech, it's actions, even though exactly the opposite is true. The government is saying they didn't break any laws. It's about national security. It's the ideas. That's point blank what the government's putting forward. And the conversation becomes that it's not about a free speech conversation, except that's explicitly what it is about. The government is drawing a line, which is a line that continues to move about fire in a theater, whatever else. It's continuing to argue whether you agree with those things or not. It's not about, right? It's about understanding what the line always was. Even if we wanted to argue before that line should have been moved, and now arguing that as it rapidly moves, that it's always been in the same place by the people who were arguing that it should never move. It's infuriating. It's alarming. And I'm actually really hopeful that a lot of, I have to believe that most conservatives or just anybody out there who genuinely believes these things, understand them enough to see that this is not that, are honest enough to call this out. And I see plenty of them. Mostly the comments that I see, You have to understand, guys, that the majority of the conversation that we see are the influential, loud, lots of, people that have followings. I was just going to list off different categories. The point is honest people, liars, grifters, people that are just there to get clip. I mean, it's a whole category of people that have influence. Now, what you have to understand is that a very small percentage of the real conversation that's being had between neighbors and friends and the country, the vast majority of people have low enough followings on whatever platform they're on for their voice to not really reach the conversation that we have in the country. And even more so because of the technological manipulations, the technocratic consolidation of power that's becoming even more difficult to see around what they're framing as that conversation, which I find not to be honest most of the time. But just realize that a lot of people out there, that you don't get to hear their opinion, even though you have these people on left and right framing as if their opinion is everyone's opinion. We, the people, think this. We see the kind of things like that all the time, or the same thing during COVID from the left. And it wasn't true. So just think about that and realize that you're not alone. Just like with COVID, if you're out there going, I feel really uncomfortable with what this is. I know this is not what we're fighting for. And don't just fall back into, well, it must be something I don't see, or that they are going to bring it back once they get rid of the deep state. That's not what the reality is, guys. These people are continuing the same things. And we'll go through a good point to start about that in regard to a new financial surveillance aspect, which is all part of the same kind of conversation. Using some kind of threat to rationalize the deterioration. I mean, really the best way to frame it, I even struggled with this word for the title today, is the and it doesn't sound as good for a title, but the lack of acknowledgement of your rights. Because that's the real way to frame that. Your rights don't just disappear because some tyrannical government decides to ignore them. That's why they're inherent. That's why they're God-given, based on the founding father documentation, or the word they used, or the basic understanding of the way that they outlined that, which was that those rights existed, whether or not they wrote these papers down. And then, of course, realize that inherent God-given wouldn't apply to one select country. And we've gone over this again. We'll go over it again today, that, of course, especially due process, especially free speech, apply in most cases to even illegal immigrants. According to Supreme Court rulings, according to the Constitution, according to expert lawyers, not the screaming partisans online, but people that actually know what they're talking about. Now, the main thing today is to make sure we understand that if we allow this to continue, this will be a stepping stone to our detriment. And I see grifters and sycophants, some people that don't care that it's happening, some that don't even realize it, that are screaming for their own demise. And I think that's factually exactly what's happening. And I may say factually because I think we can, as we go through today, I think the facts make this obvious. It's like saying the color red is blue and then debating that we're wrong because it's a nuanced point. No, it's not. It's obviously a very clear thing. The definition is there. They just decide to pretend it's something else because of an interest. Now, that happens in partisanship. And we're also going to talk about DOGE today, as I said, around the lawsuits, around the financial aspect. And then kind of extension from that, a lot of conversations about the tariffs, the Greenland, Panama, like all these weird kind of evolving stories that just seem to be, I mean, we'll wait to get there. There's a whole bunch of nuance to get into about why we think these are happening, if they're ever even going to materialize. And if that's the case, if they're not meant to, what's that about? But I think it's more than that. But it's hard to tell because it hasn't happened. But even Greenland is still being discussed. Panama is like, well, we'll make a deal or maybe take it by force. Like, that's what they're actually saying. Even if you don't believe they mean those things, as we can see with Canada, just the ideas, the words being floated have real world consequences, usually not for them, but for you. And they don't care about you. Of course, we need to understand that today. And that's the real point. But I want to start with something important today that I've referenced before. But, just I want to make sure we're continuing to support what Steve is doing with the Third Eye Carnival, because he's putting a lot into it. So I want to make sure we're continuing to shout this out. And in case you didn't hear us talk about it and Wake Up, April 4th, as he actually, I don't think it's up, maybe it's not on the, oh yeah, it's right here. The 4th, which is the first day of this. And as you can see here, it's $90 for all 3 days. And just so you know, not that it should really matter, but I've got no investment in this. I've got no return from any of this. I just believe in what they're doing. And I also, the point is that the first day, as I was going to show you, Steve sort of decided to make that our birthday party. And for funny enough, I kind of thought it was going to be like a side thing with like a few of us playing guitars. And apparently it's literally on the flyer. So this is going to be like a whole thing. And so the third, or rather the 4th, is the first day. And as he says right here, he says Friday night kicks off the music and jams and a combo birthday celebration for our very own Steve and Ryan Cristian. Saturday, we get the very best of the Uncancelable podcast, comedians. In case you didn't see, you got people like Sam Tripoli. You know, in regard to music, you've got Scott's going to be playing. I'm going to be playing Faithless Town. As I said, Spiderland, others. I mean, there's a lot of people. Apparently, Greg Reese said he might be coming. Frank Kavanaugh. You know, a lot of different people are going to be coming, and including a lot of people that just simply bought tickets and came, you know? So my point is, this is going to be a good time. And if you want to even join the birthday party bash in the beginning, make sure you come for all 3 days. I just think it's going to be a good time. And I think it's important to find the community in times like this, nonpartisan kind of conversation. Because trust me, guys, there are people, especially because of the way we do this, on all sides of this conversation. I mean, and you notice this from anything during COVID-19. There are people that believe these things were, you know, trans conversation. I mean, there are people in this audience that are transgender, that understand that what we're doing is a nuanced discussion about what's really happening. Not that we're saying you're not allowed to make choices in your life. I mean, I laid out my opinions around that. And I know that there are people in this audience who are transgender that believe in this work. Even if we still disagree on certain points about their own life choices, I still argue it's their choice to make that, not as a child, but as an adult. And see, the point is that anybody objective, even if we disagree on these central points, can still find the importance of work that maintains that objectivity. Anyway, that's what you find in communities like this. And I think it's important. So shout out to that yet again. Now, I wanted to start with something quick before we get into the point that I really wanted to start with, which is around, as the Cato Institute wrote, Trump Treasury expands financial surveillance, which is first just a couple of, we're not going to get into really Israel today, other than the overlap of why this censorship is happening. And that's just transparent. But this, just in case you're missing it, because I haven't really done focus on what's happening in Israel, or rather Gaza or Syria, or other than Vanessa's interview in a few days. It's not stopping, guys. I mean, it's surprise, surprise, right? The genocide is continuing. They haven't let food in for over 10, 11 days, or water or electricity. I mean, and all these different reports are coming out all over the place. And it's only going to be a couple quick points, but just to make sure we don't miss how alarming it is, in case you don't understand it by now, that all of this is happening for this country while they're committing genocide. And even if you don't believe that, this point isn't deniable. They're literally saying this is because anti-Semitism. This is about anti-Israel hate. Not actions, not violence, not crimes. They made that clear. This is national security threats because he's connected to something. That's what they're telling you. Even though you can prove that what they're claiming is not actually verifiable. It's which we'll get into again, connections to people like they were at a protest and these people said this on their Instagram and therefore he's responsible for their statements. Oh, even though we can't prove they actually said it, since the post is deleted and we can't verify it ever even happened. Great time. The sad thing is, clearly, if you are in a situation, or you can, I mean, even a fraction of what's happening today, just in Gaza, and they're telling you you're not allowed to protest that country to the point to where they're willing to deport people for that country. Because remember, Batar US, which is a Zionist organization founded by Jabotinsky, and this is like the rabid, alarming, violent colonial settler terrorism, which is most Zionism reality if you look back to the history to this very day, but the worst side of it. And they are ultimately the ones that were going, Trump, Marco Rubio, Bondi, go after this guy for weeks. And then they went after the one person. And as even Candace Owen points out, what about the other people that you arrested that literally actually committed violence? Why wouldn't you just pick one of them? Why? Because they're making a point here, guys, for something other than American interests. Now here, in case you missed it, is what the United Nations is saying. And yes, I know the United Nations is Hamas. Are we really that stupid? Are we still pretending that anybody that said something that ridiculously broad is actually worth taking seriously? Consider that they might be compromised in 1,000 different ways. But if you're going to make a claim, for example, like he wants the end of Western civilization, you damn well better even prove it, at least present any evidence besides a screenshot that we can't verify. In this case, if you want to pretend that the UN is Hamas, whatever that even means, to the point to where you disregard a massive body of inner working people that are proving these claims on the ground that you can check for yourself, not to say we just blindly trust the UN, because nobody should. The evidence is there, then you're just choosing to ignore this. This is what's really happening.
Frequency, prevalence and severity of sexual and gender-based crimes perpetrated across the occupied Palestinian territory leads the Commission to conclude that sexual and gender-based violence is increasingly used as a method of war by Israel to destabilise, dominate, oppress and destroy the Palestinian people. The Commission documented a pattern of sexual violence, including cases of rape and other forms of sexual violence, torture and other inhumane acts that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Now, just in case you didn't see the show yesterday, this is, and yeah, she does have the link right here. This is a report that just came out. March 13th, more than a human can bear. Israel's systemic use of sexual, reproductive, and other forms of gender-based violence just since October 2023. You can look at the reports going back decades. This is systemic. This is a plan. That's why they debated on live TV whether they should be allowed to rape. And guess how most of them argued? Yes, they should. In regard to people they have in their prisons. And then also recognize that most of the people they have in these prisons are there without charge. They're there for decades sometimes, taken when they're children, released when they're 25. We've seen this since this has started. It's just insane. The kind of people that are acting like not only we should ignore all of this because you're racist, but then actively trying to suppress what they pretend they're fighting for this government. It's very unnerving for people like us to see this so plainly continue to happen. When I say people like us, I mean people that are objective and not blinded by partisanship. Read it for yourself. And then check out the information and the background and how obvious. You can go back decades. Human rights groups, even Israelis inside their government openly admitting this, whistleblowers, but let's all pretend it's not there because, politics. She simply says the UN accused Israel of using rape and torture as weapons of war. Oh, and by the way, just in case you think, UN is Hamas, right? So we just can't take that at face value. Well, maybe you would take it face value, or rather you shouldn't take anything at face value. The point is maybe you would give more credence to the leading Israeli human rights group. Literally, B'Tselem. This is the Israeli leading human rights group. Welcome to Hell was what this was called. The Israeli prison system as a network of torture camps. This was written specifically after the Sid Tiemann rape case, and this is disgusting. You want to not sleep tonight? Read this report. The problem is that people pretend like this isn't happening for their own partisan agenda. Now, I thought this was interesting just to include, since we're not going to get into more today. I can't stop seeing, right now, more than ever, they're pulling out all the stops. And I mean people that are trying to propagandize you to not see certain things. Gad Saad, or however you pronounce this guy's name, is a self-professed, he's admitted to being a Mossad agent, just so it's clear. Now, what's crazy is we just talked about this. If you're on the show, the podcast I'll explain in a second. It's just a woman in a burqa, it looks like, right? And Radio Genoa, which, by the way, is the same group from before that I think was even tagging this. Let me double check that. Hold on. Let's see if he shared. We'll come back to. Oh no, it was a different group. I thought it was. But this is a group that's been in many examples part of the propaganda network, right? 1.3 million followers, and that's what this is. Just not to get into deep, these are groups that have been utilized like by the U.S. government propaganda network situation, and they simply says, "What is this?" on March 13th. Well, I'll tell you what it is. That's an Israeli Jewish woman in Israel. I know you may not believe that, especially if you haven't seen what I'm about to show you directly from the Jewish Forward post. But he says all cultures are equal. Now, what he's trying to do right there is act like he's trying to be funny, like clearly, as if he's insinuating that this is a Muslim woman being forced to wear a burqa, right? The problem is that's not what it is. But I did this. We posted the same thing when Tavi Robinson did the same thing. Another very clear, obvious agent. And he says, this has no place in the 21st century. I simply said, well, will you still call this out as having no place in the 21st century once you realize it's actually a picture of a Jewish woman in Israel? As forward, covered below, which I'll show you in a second. Of course not. They don't even care. It's about just winning some points. Even if they use their own, or whatever they think they're trying to fight against or for, to make the point. So, like I said with Sad Gad, or Gad Sad, whatever it is, I said, the other one, I don't think I said, I basically said, seems like everyone already called you out for this obvious attempt to manipulate people, or worse, you actually didn't know this is a video of a Jewish woman in Israel, but I will include what I said to Tommy Robinson. Now, I think before, I simply said, what are you, an anti-Semite? Like trying to play it back at him? Like, are you calling out this Jewish woman for their heritage? I mean, clearly, guys, it's actually insane that this happens to the point to where they don't even care. So just in case you haven't seen this, here's the actual article. I mean, you can look into this for yourself. It says, introducing the Frumqua, Jewish woman under the burqa. And it says, no, this is not a Dementor or a modern art installation. This isn't even, as more likely to expect, a Muslim woman wearing a burqa. No, this was the photographer Yaakov Lerdman saw this site in Bet Shemesh, a Jewish woman and her two daughters. Dark black cloth covering them head to toe. Yeah, exactly. And why is it so impossible for these people to have an honest conversation? Well, because they're dishonest. Not just accidentally wrong, literally dishonest. Because if they were in any way honest, of course, they would go, oh my gosh, I made a mistake or deleted it. Or no, they don't care. That's the main point to make here. 225,000 views. You won't see them respond to this, but looks plenty of people down there going, look, this is from Times of Israel. All they're trying to do is make you hate Muslim people, even if they have to show you a Jewish woman that they pretend is a Muslim person. This is disgusting. This is why the Loomers and all the rest of these people out there that are screeching about this are clearly doing this for an agenda. Maybe they say simultaneously just are disgusting people who hate people because of their race. Either way, it is a manipulation. It's incredible how obvious this is today. I'm really hoping that people can see this. Oh, there it was. Of course, I always do that to myself. I said, are you implying that this Jewish woman is not treated equally in Israel? Are you an anti-Semite? It's just, no, it's, of course, on this platform, they'll go nowhere, even though if people actually got to, things like this on a platform like this that are contradictory, that basically show somebody wrong or catch them in a lie, no matter what it's about, those things tend to get a lot of reach. Not on this platform, though, especially if it's about Israel. Very obvious to see. Now, some points I wanted to include before we get into everything else. This is not the action just yet, but it's a continual step in the right direction. But this is what I'm worried about, is that it becomes sort of an ongoing narrative about things that we're trying to do, and then it just drifts into the background, which is, he says, I'm directing the FDA commissioner to start the process of changing the rules to eliminate the self-affirmed GRAS, which is generally recognized as safe, which is just ridiculous in its own right, pathway for new ingredients. He says, I'm also calling on the USDA and the NIH to continue to conduct and improve post-market assessments of GRAS chemicals currently in our food so we can rapidly identify the compounds that are making Americans sick. Well, I'm pretty sure we already know what makes people sick in this country by and large. Nonetheless, I like this direction. And it says, and so that American consumers and regulators can make informed choices. Like the idea of making sure they can't hide ingredients, or that we make this so they can't jam through things into some ridiculous, generally recognized as safe dynamic, which is what they claim about all the dangerous things that we put in our bodies. That's a good thing. But directing them to start the process of changing the rules to get that done is a long way away from actually happening. I want to point that out because, as always, the statements like this get framed as the big thing. We're changing everything. It's a step in the right direction, and I'm happy to see that. We got to wait until we actually see something continue. Let's wait to see what the FDA commissioner begins to do based on him saying that. I mean, it could very well devolve into a standoff between the two of them, even though RFK Jr. does have the authority to make that happen. Or the NIH being included, it's like, let's realize, guys, they didn't just, there's a lot of overlap to the same NIH that happened during COVID-19. I just think it's interesting. I think a lot of this is an illusory dynamic of looking like change is happening. But Day-Centered News simply points out that you said last March that the mRNA shots were causing documented harm to, quote, so many innocent children and adults. Myocarditis, pericarditis, brain inflammation. We all know this. He was just saying this publicly before he took office. He says, why isn't this a higher priority? Now, maybe it's because he tried and they wouldn't let him. I mean, no, it's not about knowing that he's the not, for me right now, it's not about trying to show he's not the one. He said, I have my own doubts, like anybody obviously should for a lot of reasons, but I don't think we can prove that he is not the person he claims to be, at least in the context of health. We'll put it that way. But I would say, my opinion, I'm very doubtful for a lot of reasons, but just to be objective, it's just as likely that Trump's mRNA platform design clearly, it's not even a question, that contradicts what he wants to do. If you're going to say mRNA is dangerous, which we know it is, why would Trump let that happen if he just invested $500 billion of other people's money into a massive direction for mRNA? So it just shows you a problem here. Either you have to recognize that he has been neutered and is not allowed to do what he wants, which means they're using him as a token to keep people tricked into thinking they're going in the right direction, or he also has changed his direction. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Problematic, though, isn't it? It's obvious to me that this is far cry from what we wanted to see. Ending the deep state, shutting this down, slashing the government, changing mRNA, all these big slashy moves, which basically became take the same thing and make it a little bit better for ourselves. It's just wild. Now, I wanted to point this out, too, before we got started. I just think this is crazy. Now, I should have done this first, actually, but for those right now that are watching on Rockfin, I respectfully ask that you watch anywhere else. Now, if you only have that platform and you don't like anything else, I'm going to keep posting my content there like I do on YouTube. Same difference at the end of the day. But I'm recognizing something here that's becoming very problematic, which is just, I'll go right through it for you, just so you can see exactly what my concerns are. If you're watching on that platform, there's plenty of other platforms that I'd rather you watch on that I think are even better to watch on. Secondarily, if you want to donate to this platform or to TLAV, I ask that you do it anywhere else in this platform. That's just my personal opinion, but I'm still going to be there if you decide to do it. I simply said, okay, Rockfin, we need some answers. Now, we've been going back and forth around things like, I've even personally been tweeting or direct messaging or even, back and forth to kind of find out what's going on, especially during this weird change where all of a sudden nobody's being paid out. And that was like a couple months ago, but it was very weird because they never tried to update anybody. They never gave us information. I basically had to reach out and go, guys, what's going on? Why am I not being paid? And they go, how much do we owe you? I said, this much. And they give me the money in like an hour. I'm like, well, that almost made me feel worse. Like that felt really weird how that just happened, knowing there are other people that didn't get their funds, right? So it's been weird. Now, I've gave them the benefit of the doubt first to go, hey, maybe they're going through some transition. Maybe the last team left them a dumpster fire. Maybe there's things that, legalities. Because you take over a business, in many cases, you tend to be legally responsible for even things that were done by the previous group. So that's a very damaging, hard situation. I don't know what's going on. I'm just throwing out these ideas that I had at the time. Now, today, I saw something I've seen it begin on some of the channels, and I wasn't sure if it was a glitch or whatnot, but now today we can see that there are many accounts that have been zeroed out. I said, either you address the clear shift in principles or explain to us why this is happening. They've apparently removed all the followers from James Corbett, Indie News Network, What is Truth podcast, and like 4 or 5 others they list down below. You can look for yourself, guys. I mean, Corbett was just speaking about this on AM Wake Up this morning. 0 followers. Here is Indie News Network, 0 followers. What is news? And look, and they even put this up here. Account terminated. Please follow alternate platforms. I mean, and just so it's clear, this has already come. They've emailed them and told them that they did this. They've removed them. They've zeroed them out. Now, Indie News Network says this is the email that was sent to one of the creators, not everybody on the platform, and not even all of them being zeroed out. To me, this is inherently dishonest. Even if it's somehow they're bound by something, like this is just wrong. The way they went about this is wrong. And I just can't support that. Now it says, which may help shed some light. Now here's what it says. Hi, Rockfin is evolving. We're doubling down on creators who are actively building their audience and driving recruiting revenue through premium content, which I don't do. So let's see if they kick me off as well, which is just crazy. Unfortunately, your channel hasn't hit the momentum needed to fit this new direction. So we'll be revoking your publishing permissions. Yeah, so you're basically kicking people off your platform because they don't get enough reach or enough benefit to you. Now, yeah, look, it's a business. You do what you want to do. But if you're not going to show people that's what's happening, if you're letting people build these things only to kick them off because you don't like that's as bad as anywhere else, if not worse. At least they only said it to one person apparently, but this is wrong, guys. That said, we believe in creators having control over their audience. Attached, you'll find the email contacts you built on Rockfin. Well, at least they gave them those email contacts, as far as we understand. Feel free to let them know where they can continue to follow your work. So it doesn't appear as if it's some kind of like, we want to stop you from having people see your work. I mean, it's hard to feel there's some overlap with what's going on in the world today, but to me, it's just wrong. That's just bad. You can't let people build this up only to pull that rug out and not even tell anybody that's happening. They've been zeroed out for months now. So I just want you guys to see what's going on. I have a problem with that. So to get into the first point about this that I think is very relevant to the larger conversation around how not just free speech or I guess the larger premise is using like we've been saying about the administration so far, using things that we want to change in order to basically bring down something that will go, we want that to go away, but only to build into it something worse. And the only reason we're being allowed to see it as a problem or bring it down is because they've already been ready to bring in the new thing. And that's just straight up happening in a lot of ways. And I've got opinions about others too that I think might be in that realm, but let's realize provably there are things just like that happening, whether it's the mRNA direction, whether it's the technocratic drive, with all these different things that they're still building out. And I mean like to a T, exactly. This is an example of the smaller version of it, rather saying, bad guy terrorism, just like they're doing with Khalil, in order to do exactly what Biden did, but even worse. March 13th. Says more than 1 million Americans are about to face a new level of financial surveillance. Now, just really think about this, guys, about the idea of the Great Reset, about invasiveness, privacy, constitutional rights, liberty, freedom, and how you feel this adds up at all. Well, because bad guys, right? We got terrorism over there, so we have to spy on your financial transactions. In no world would Republicans agree with that if it was a Democrat. And anybody who's honest would make sure we understand if they, you could have your own opinions, but people who are aware of the problem here or your constitutional rights, anybody honest would say no matter who does it, that's a problem. And that's the reality. This is what the article's even getting to at the end. The reality is this is bad no matter who does it. And now it's just like James Corbett was telling you, it is a foundational step in administration to administration. And that's exactly what this is. Financial surveillance based on the idea that we have an unknown threat is exactly the slippery slope we're trying to show you. Now, it says the Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network announced that the threshold for currency transaction reports has been lowered from $10,000 to $200. And this is specifically for Americans living in largely California and Texas. Now, it says financial surveillance in the United States has long needed reform, but this move is in the wrong direction. Now, I personally find it crazy that you're selectively applying this to people in certain areas, even though this is about, or at least the guise of this is about the border, about Mexican cartels, about terrorism. But it seems strange, doesn't it, to make this about, I mean, if that's the case, why not Florida? Why not, or rather not Florida, but specifically maybe so like, well, I guess Texas and California is the bulk of it for the most part. But the reality is ultimately, guys, it doesn't matter what the narrative is. This is a violation of your privacy. They don't have any legal right other than creating their own unconstitutional laws to just claim that because of what we think might be happening, that we then get to dive in and look at what you're doing with your transactions. Again, this is where we end up today, where ultimately anybody with the principles are going to go, well, yes, obviously, err on the side of your rights and privacy. But you've got the Republicans who claim to be like that today, who are going, no, because you're going to be a terrorist. Because why? You don't hide anything. You don't have to, what's that? What do they say? If you have nothing to hide, then it's like we're back in Bush neocon times, it seems. It says financial surveillance in the United States has long needed reform, but this is a move in the wrong direction. Now it says FinCEN officially announced the temporary policy change is an effort to further combat the illicit activities and money laundering of Mexico-based cartels and other criminal actors along the southwest border of the United States. Now, if you believe for 1 second this will be temporary in any real context, you aren't paying attention. Now, the number can easily fluctuate, but the reality of giving them setting the precedent to where they can just dive through your personal information no matter what, as long as they claim we think bad things might be happening, and then realize half the time they don't even have a real threat. They just use that as the reason to go after things they want to find out. That's any side as far back as you want to look. But it says Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, quote, as part of a whole of government approach to combating the threat, Treasury remains focused on leveraging all our available tools and authorities to better identify and counter these criminal activities. Scott Bessent being the person, the only person in the world apparently that it doesn't matter have direct ties to Soros. As they're all screaming about Soros, which is a valid point to make, but it's only half the story. Apparently it doesn't matter when he has funding that made his business based on Soros or direct ties back to him in the order. It's just basic hypocrisy, as always. Anybody with a D next to the name, these things matter more than anything. Of course, when it's not, but it's the same thing in reverse. Partisanship breaks logic or creates dishonesty. You can look at it both ways. But it goes on to say, whether it's the mob or the cartel, as in like the mob is like organized crime. Organized crime is not an easy thing to deal with. This is the article speaking. It says, however, this challenge does not mean Americans should have their rights stripped away in the pursuit of justice. Which again, to break it down to its simplest terms, that's what it is. You have rights to privacy. Like, I mean, if you were going to pretend, like, if they just came, the government in any context, left or right, said, we want to look at what you did, what you spent money on yesterday. Would you be like, yeah, why not? Or at the very least, would you go, that's my choice to make, not yours? You know as well as I that most Americans who believe in any of our rights would absolutely die on that hill in a conversation. But now we're seeing this happen, right? Where they're saying, no matter what the case, we should not have a right stripped away, even if it's actually in the pursuit of justice. That's obvious because then that opens the door. And we've been there for a long time. This door has been kicked in. This is what we're watching happen. But it says, as Fight for the Future warned Congress in 2023 during Biden's administration, quote, should criminals successfully tempt the United States to abandon the human right to privacy and the U.S. Constitution, everyone will lose. They were saying that to Biden's administration. And of course, whether they're actually going after criminals or not is irrelevant. The article finishes by saying that was true when the Biden administration tried to surveil bank accounts with just $600, which Republicans roundly cried out as a crime because it was a problem. And that is true now that Trump administration is surveilling as little as $200. So right now, I should have done this, but I was organizing a lot today. Go find some of these Republicans that were screaming about what Biden did with that was crazy. I'm willing to bet you that most of them will not say a word about Trump doing it even worse. But you'll also find a lot of people out there, I think the majority, hopefully, that are in these crowds and are calling it out. They just don't have 10 million followers. Very important to think about, guys. So the main point again, using the guys or even actually going after people from the cartel, but in order to then suppress your right. It's like the NSA spying on you because terrorism, guys. It's the same conversation. And we look back now, we realize that half of what they were doing wasn't even about that. It was just using that guys to look at you. Or we could talk about FISA warrants. It's all the same conversation. It's time to stand with principles and integrity. Oops. Close that one. Now, so this continues that conversation. You might have seen this. Many points to make here. Nick Sorter says, Pam Bondi announces an arrest has been made for Epstein client list? No. For deep state people? No. For Bill Gates or Fauci? No, none of that. For somebody who threw a Molotov cocktail at a Tesla showroom. Man, they're really going after those small people that are carrying out violent acts against Elon Musk. Or, it's just so, now let's be clear. Obviously it's a crime. It's obviously a crime. You're vandalizing property. You're breaking a window. Okay. But this is actually crazy to me that we're talking with so many big things that they were all pretending these people will work. And then the focus becomes, we're going after anybody. If you go after a Tesla, we're coming for you. That's what she says. You're looking at 20 years in prison. 20 years in prison for... If you're going to touch a Tesla, she says, go to a dealership, do anything, you better watch out because we're coming for you. Yeah, I wonder if the Epstein sexual traffickers are just as worried. What do you think? And Nick's order says, charge them with terrorism because these people are children. I mean, I'm embarrassed for these people, and I'm hoping all these people out there can see how silly this is. I mean, look, it's a crime. Charge them with a crime, obviously. Now, let's also find out whether it was done to themselves or it was a Republican doing it to blame a Democrat. I don't know anything. I'm saying this point is all those things are always possible. So everyone that jumps to conclusions before we have anything to back anything up are part of the problem. Look, the honest point is I would argue it's clearly most likely this was somebody who is angry about Musk and what he's doing, who is a Democrat probably, and did this because they're angry with him. No way that's justified. My point is that nobody really knows, and everyone jumps to conclusions. And for this child to say, charge them with terrorism, I mean, this is the slope we're on, guys. This is an authoritarian wet dream. They are running this forward to the point to where whatever they don't like is suddenly terrorism. Guess what, guys? Your government's been doing that to the world for 100 years. Now these people pretending we are the media now fighting for free speech are literally destroying all of that, including free speech. I simply said, this is what team sport politics looks like. Who cares about the Epstein files? Let's use government power to go after alleged haters of Elon. Because winning. Wow, this is everything, say all the partisan followers. Right now, look for yourself. This is action. We're watching it take place. We're winning. I'm speechless. As Sal the Agorist writes, it's been 3 weeks since Pam Bondi said Epstein's client list was on her desk. I guess we're not worried about that anymore. See, but if you look at the comments, a lot of conservatives are going, what the F? They just don't have 10 million followers, right? So the problem is that the grifters take note of that don't want to talk about this and you know what? I'd even be willing to point out many of them probably actually care about seeing this. My point is whether they don't or they do, they'll pull the punch for the Trump administration or in the other context for the Democrat side. Whoever's in power, these people in partisanship will decide to ignore the facts, even if they want to see it or believe in the truth, because they've been convinced that's somehow the greater good. It's all dishonesty though, and it's wild. And he puts this out as well. These memes based on for the podcast. The what's it called? What's that called? Pawn Stars, I think, or whatever it is, where they're selling from the pawn shop. And it says, "Can we get an Epstein list?" And she goes, "Best I can do is deport you if you criticize Israel." It's exactly what's happening. It's insane. Now, on top of that, I found this quite interesting. Elon Musk is giving Trump another $100 million just after the president did an ad for Tesla. There's a lot of weird stuff. I mean, the idea about all this, like just to break it down in case you're not paying attention to these ridiculous side points, To me, it's relevant about the overlap of what they're not doing and the partisan mania to try to hide the bigger picture. But what's behind it all is this weird Tesla overlap. Let's understand what's happening right now is that he's lost a lot of money because Tesla stock has dropped quite a bit. Then on top of that, the resale value of these Teslas dropped by more than half. And people are trying to sell. I can't suss out whether it's like everybody or only the Democrat. The point is a good portion of people are selling their cars or not buying them. Remember, Tesla was largely more of a left-leaning thing, like the electric car. And so what's interesting is he's been kind of suffering from that. And on top of that, then people, as you can see, are arguably going after his dealerships and so on. Now, Trump stands up and goes, I'm going to do this and buy this because Elon help his family. Oh, his family, huh? Because he's a struggling single dad, right? Not a billionaire, a technocrat, oligarch, doesn't have a want in the world. Yeah, buy it to help out Elon. Like, it's just so sad how easy it is to play people who are invested in the ideology and the hero worship of these people. But to me, this looks like a lot more. This looks like, here's money. Help me build, help me. This is a personal exchange, not a government thing. And this is what we're at. This is these people, and it's not unique to one side. Always understand that. This is just being very clumsy and forward about it. That this is buying things in this administration. Look at Miriam Adelson. It seems like the price. Then, of course, to make it even more obvious, hey, Benjamin Netanyahu chimes in. That's not weird at all for a genocide-committing leader of a country that should be arrested by the ICC that's been funding and influencing these exact people since the beginning to step up in the midst of this Tesla thing and go, hey, Israel asks Tesla to bid on tender for top officials' cars. Right. So the genocide leader is going to help out Elon in a jam. That does nothing weird there. It's not like he's been doing everything they asked for their benefit, and now they're going to bail them out. There's a lot of ways you could look at this. The bottom line is this is a terrible, evil person who he is buddied up next to, who is now helping him in a personal situation by simply dumping money into a company that people are acting out against because of politics. And he said, much appreciated. And this person says, the market in Israel. And it says, Israeli protesters rally for the right to rape prisoners. Very real, publicly discussed on most mainstream channels. So the point is, he's just simply going, this is disgusting. Like, you are being, I guess, supported by the worst government in the world. That's debatable based on a few things, but I'm talking about in the context of being in the midst of a genocide. Now, this person simply points out, you are known by the company you keep. In this case, the absolute scum of the planet. Gareth Ike points out, in a more of a partisan sense, he says, from what I can see, if you adore Trump and Musk, the algorithm loves you. If you despise Trump and Musk, but adore the Democrat alternatives, the algorithm loves you. If you say you're an all bastards acting in unison as two wings of the uniparty, you get throttled. Telling. How long have we been talking about this, guys? That's the point. Objective, nonpartisan, they don't want that because they can't play that. The two-party illusion is their bread and butter. That's how they maintain this whole broken thing. What he's highlighting is that anybody honest can see. If you tap into the two-party illusion, start cheering one of those false paradigm sides, you get benefited from it. Now ask yourself how that makes sense. If it's one bad guy side and one good guy side. Ian White says the propagandists of our day are the ones who promote the dual party system. I couldn't agree more. Whichever side they're cheerleading, it is is regardless. They give the entire system credence, to which ensures continuity of government. Well said. Then I want to add one last point to this that was funny, because here's what you keep getting, right? In the midst of this collapsing paradigm, you get these people that are trying to prop it up. Wall Street Mav says Republicans versus Democrats. Because you understand, they all sense this thing it's fragile right now. And so what do they need to do? Keep pushing. This one says Republican platform, free enterprise, secure borders, honest elections, real journalism, ethical judiciary, civil rights, moral standards, personal liberty. God, it's like, you want to give me 4 hours, I could break down how ridiculous it is. The point is obviously stupid to make the claim that that's what they stand for. You can prove that in every case, your government doesn't believe in just about any of those things. And then the Democrat platform says, hate Trump. Okay. Partially true. I said, here, I'll fix it for you. Republican platform, hate Democrats, sell out to lobbyists, ignore Israel. Democrat platform, hate Republicans, sell out to lobbyists, ignore Israel. That's your reality, guys. That's the point. So the two-party illusion is how you keep people trapped because it's the same thing. We need to start making this a bigger case. For those that believe it anyway. If you think I'm wrong, then good. Then show. I'd love to see why you think that. Show me the evidence. Now, Massie, as an extension of the two-party illusion point, has gotten even crazier. It's funny how these things continue to extend, and this one is really interesting to me. So this is the post from Trump, which I won't go over it again. Bottom line is Trump is calling out Massie for not voting the way Trump likes, which in and of itself to an adult is embarrassing. The way that he puts congressman in quotes like this, it's a childish attack on somebody who's just not towing the line. That's silly to me. Like honest people would be like, well, that's embarrassing. Like at least go, I wish you, like lay out the facts. Don't just undermine and attack somebody because they don't do what you like. That's bully tactics. That's childish. The bottom line is he mentions he can't even approve a continuing resolution, which I find interesting, seeing as how right now Trump is praising, we'll get to it in a second, I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden, the Democrat leader for backing down and allowing them to go forward. I just think it's interesting. So what it shows you, just like, Zionism, Judaism, it's not about Jews, it's about Zionism, same thing. It's not about one side or the other, it's about the agenda. And it's constantly the case. And we'll go to that in a second. But he says, Thomas Massie's a grandstander, says the biggest grandstander in the room. And the great people of Kentucky are going to be watching very interesting primary in the not too distant future. That's a threat. That's him suggesting either he's going to do something, or at least that the point suggests that he is going to do something to get him out of power, or maybe that he knows that AIPAC is already fighting to stop that. Kind of hard not to see the latter, clearly, as this person is tapped into the Israeli machine. The problem is that's not about anything other than the Israeli outcome. Now, I said, well, this is very telling, Trump attacking Massie for not towing the line. And there's the link to the actual Truth Social. Now, since then, we got some interesting developments. And I think this is so hilarious to see which people, the leaders of this fake community, or rather the partisan fake dynamic, are screaming about how this guy is now compromised. Literally talking about, and I'll go through exactly what they're pointing to, which just like I said yesterday, glad I did, because it's always my opinion. I don't trust any of these people. Even Massie, who seems to say almost entirely what I want to hear today, because historically speaking, I don't know why we would ever choose to trust any of these people. Question all of them all the time, even almost consider that they're probably lying, as long as you think and consider all perspectives, because typically they are. In this case, like I said yesterday, like I briefly mentioned, I think, funding coming from certain people they're claiming are tied back to X, Y, and Z. Yes, most likely. I think all these people are being influenced and funded in ways that make them compromised. That doesn't change what he's saying being true in the point we're making today. It's the same as always. I don't care if it's Pelosi, Maxine Waters, Donald Trump. If it's just text and they're making a point, if all you care about is who it is, you're trapped in the cult of personality. It matters, obviously, but the point is, if the context is still true, it's still true, regardless of who says it. The point is, it matters insofar as you wonder why they might be trying to use that. Then you get into why, and you can think, well, what have they done? Why would they want to put the truth out? The problem is people ignore the truth or say it's false because of the person behind it. They've been doing this for a long time. That's what these people live on. Now, Cat Turd writes, can all you Massie simps, by the way, isn't it wild how this guy is like one of the most, like in the conservative conversation, libertarian, like especially even before the selection. Remember, they were all trying to pretend like Massie was going to be the guy, this guy included. Why? Because they needed to trick all those people that actually believe in constitutional rights and freedom. And now that he's barely stepping out of line and Trump decides to make a mean post about him, all the sycophants jump up and start clapping like seals. And he says, can you Massie simps who brag about him not being an AIPAC, which he's not being funded by AIPAC, explain why his number one donor is Jeffrey Yass? Just curious. Can you please explain to me and all my followers? Now, what's hilarious about this is it's $32,000. $32,000. I mean, really think about how dumb it is to argue that much money is more consequential than, I don't know, 1,800,000 that people like, what was it? Now blank. Oh, I thought it was the people that get hundreds of thousands to 1 million from AIPAC, like Rubio, like Trump got 100 millions from many different Israeli oligarchs, and even more so, even overlapping with Elon, who gets directly influenced by them. But really, the point is that almost everybody, left and right, are funded by AIPAC. Massie seems to be the only one that is proudly saying, I've not taken $1 and I don't have an AIPAC guy like everybody else does. And these people want you to go after that more. Now, we should consider this just like everything, which is why my stance is always that I think all of them are potentially compromised. But you need not realize how disgustingly dishonest it is for this person to pull the punch for everyone on their side who are taking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for some of them from AIPAC, like Tom Cotton, for example, but then go after him for something that is like you're trying to make the same point in a lesser way for less money. Let me show you what I mean by that. He goes, just curious, can you please explain? And this person says, what does Yass's money get him? No votes. There's not enough information. What agenda does that help? How much money did he take? See, because Qatar doesn't want to include the money because that makes him look stupid because in general sense, it's a pretty small amount when it comes to politics, right? He doesn't care that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $100 million for something literally illegal, which was the West Bank annexation. That's what they publicly said. That's okay, right? But this guy gives him $32,000 and there's really no context. And his only argument, he's Jewish, not even Israeli. Now, my point, as always, is all of it should matter. Whether Jewish, Israeli, Christian, Muslim, if somebody's funding a politician, it matters. But he asked Grok, please. This is what Grok says. Jeffrey Yass donated $32,200 to Thomas Massie, likely swaying his vote against a TikTok ban. See, this is how obvious it is that Grok is biased. What do you mean likely swaying his vote? What a biased, I mean, you could say it's possible that money swayed his vote, but to say likely swayed his vote is to suggest that's probably what happened. How in the world could you know that? That's Grok for you, okay? But nonetheless, let's just pretend maybe it did, because that's certainly a possibility, right? And it says, as ByteDance investor, yeah, so again, the guy's invested in TikTok, ByteDance overlap, which let's remember is for two reasons important. One, because that's concerning regarding the Israeli influence on that, which to this very day now, they have Israeli people in the background working on the platform. But overall, simply because it is the contentious conversation around this TikTok censorship, around the China connection, all these different things. But realize, as far as I can tell, none of this has been extremely clear. The guys from Singapore, they claim it's China, but the overall point is that doesn't even seem to be the reality. So it's based on this kind of muddy water picture, when over here, you literally have Israeli agents hand delivering information, funding, spying, and they don't care about any of that. My point is it all should matter, but especially ones that you can prove in real time. But he says Massie's libertarian stance aligns, but the cash raises ethic questions. See, even Grok can tell you that, well, it doesn't even compromise him based on his principles, but it suggests there might be something. Doesn't that sound a lot like what Partisan is doing right now around Khalil and everything else, leaning into the hypothetical for their agenda? Well, here is Jeff Yass, born in 1958, Queens, New York, grew up there in a middle-class Jewish family. Now, as you know, I have no problem with somebody being Jewish, Christian, Muslim. To me, it doesn't matter. It's about their actions. Now, Zionism uses Judaism. It also uses Christianity in what we can see happening today. Infiltration, manipulation, overtaking governments, destabilization, false flags, weaponized migration, literally can prove every one of those. So what's funny to me is as this guy Cat Turd is trying to undermine the idea that somehow we're all upset with all the rest, but not this one, and then makes the point in reverse. Like he's literally trying to make the case this guy's a problem, or that we should think he's a problem because he's Jewish. I mean, it's just, they've lost the plot, guys. And I think what he's trying to do is insinuate that's what we're all doing with everything else. Most of the conversation is not. So these people continue to show how bad they are at this, how uninformed they are about most of it. Foreign contributions. It says, according to Haaretz, Yass is a major supporter of Israeli right-wing think tanks. So to me, in a general political sense, I'm like, okay, this is kind of what I was alluding to before. We should question whether that has some influence on what Massie's doing. And maybe years from now, it turns around and he becomes look at Tulsi, right? I mean, there was times when I was like, yeah, she's saying all the right things. And I want to believe that she might be choked. Well, here we are today. Oh, now she endorsed Clinton. Oh, now she's saying Islam's the biggest threat in the world. I mean, complete diametric change. Wonder why that happens. It could be that she was always built to be that, so you fell into it, or she changed for some reason. The point is, you have to continue questioning. But it says the Guardian reported that Jeff Yass donated $16 million to anti-Muslim and pro-Israel groups. So the question becomes, is that like in the sense of somebody donated to Thomas Massie? Was he something that he like shook hands with and took the money, which would make a difference? Was it donated to him through a website? Right? Or even if that was a handshake deal, does that then make the case that he's compromised? I mean, my point would be simply that if you're professing the principles that Massie does, I'd like to believe that somebody like this, just like AIPAC, you'd look in and go, well, I don't agree with your stances on this. I don't want that. But politicians, in my opinion, like I said in the beginning, are all pretty much willing to bow for money. See? So this is how easy it is to just have a logical stance. We don't blindly trust any of them. We question all of them, and we consider that all of them are probably compromised. But at the same time, what Massie continues to say is accurate. That's why you got people like this going after him, like Cat Turd and the rest, because he suddenly is not in line with what the partisan MAGA sycophant team wants. And this, yeah, so just to make it clear, he's not an Israeli. So it's just funny how this gets pushed. Here he's Cat Turd saying, how hilarious it is that all the Jew haters, see, he had to like double down and make it more clear because he was getting called out for what I was just saying, who simped for Thomas Massie. What are you even talking about? Like the idea that somehow because you support Massie, or the only people that hate Jews, which is really what he's saying, is people that are calling out Israel, which Massie does in some cases too. It says, it's hilarious how all those people found out who his biggest donor was today. Can't stop laughing. Right. You're going to ignore millions of funding to people directly from Israel, but you're going to laugh about the fact that he got $32,000 from a Jewish person who's not an Israeli. Like, this guy is ridiculous. I mean, and the point is, this is an effort to undermine somebody because Trump said, or rather just he feels the direction. Maj Tajor says, so he took money from AIPAC? No, he didn't. This is a reach. See my point? Same thing. This is Marcella J. says a whopping $13,200 was donated to Massie by Jeffrey Yass. Yass also has a stake in ByteDance, Chinese parent company that operates TikTok and has a small stake in Truth Social. That matters, doesn't it? I mean, guys, think about this. Like, so you're going to make a big case about this, or at least pretend that we're somehow doing, and you're not going to highlight the connection to Truth Social? I think you know why, guys. Hypocrites. Trump vehemently opposed TikTok, and then last March, Yass went to Mar-a-Lago to speak with Trump. After their meeting, Trump suddenly and loudly flip-flopped on the issue. If you get rid of TikTok, Facebook and Zuckerberg will double their business, he wrote on Truth Social. I don't want Facebook, who cheated in the last election, says, doing better. They are a true enemy of the people. And this ain't the flex you think, he says to Cat Turd. Right. And of course, that's the same Facebook who later, or Mark Zuckerberg, who later stood next to Trump, and they're all friends now in unity, right? Enemy of the people, until suddenly we say the same things, and it's all good. This is the best they can do. Now, realize, to be clear again, I'm not simping or advocating, whatever you call it, for Massie. I'm advocating for objective reporting and the truth. Question Massie, like, for these reasons and everything else, but realize that what they're doing here is pretty damn obvious. Vivek parody account says, so you're perfectly fine with our politicians being bought and controlled by a foreign nation like Israel because Massie is the only one brave enough to call it out. That says everything. And he really does have provable zero money from AIPAC. But that doesn't mean there's not some other part that we can't see, right? Always consider everything. But he also called out the AIPAC guy, which is a huge shift in this conversation. Thomas Massie, on the 11th, as I showed you, spoke up to Trump calling him out and said, POTUS is spending his day attacking me and Canada. The difference is Canada will eventually cave. And we'll get to that at the latter half of this in regard to the DOGE part. Now, following up on that, he posted yesterday, in less than 3 days, and this is the quote from the article rather, I've received $261,000 through 3,203 individual donations without sending an email, text, or phone call. It's a fundraising record for me, and it's boosted my current cash on hand north of $1.1 million, Massie said. And the point is, that's because Trump attacked him. Massie reveals how much campaign cash he's hauled in since Trump targeted him. See, I don't think they have the support they think they do. And that's why people like Cat Turd and the others try to come out and go, don't fall for it. They're going to try to show you that people aren't supporting MAGA anymore. It's a trick. Like before Raymond was saying it. They already see it coming. They recognize that Republicans aren't stupid, rather conservatives, that they believe in free speech, that they don't like mRNA vaccines, and there's just so much they can take. And it's collapsing. Now, let's realize that already the partisanship was not the majority. So it's a false binary in the first place. But this is only showing you that the people out there are leaning into people that they at least can, principles, integrity, at least feigning those. And on top of that, the $1.1 million in cash, but let's keep talking about $32,000 that changed everything, right? Selective outrage. Now, Jake Sherman says, Trump praises Schumer. Schumer was the one I was referencing earlier. Not exactly what Dems need right now. Schumer, Fetterman, and 6 others need to vote to vote for closure to avert a shutdown. What's interesting about this is Schumer comes out and basically says that a shutdown would give them too much power. And you know what? It's funny. This is how the false binary works. My opinion, none of them want this shutdown. None of them. It's important for their money flow, for the Gaza genocide, for a lot of things. But the bottom line is that it's about the power that they gain from having this system. And so ultimately, they every time this comes around, we've talked about it like 100 times. It's this false game. We have to make sure it doesn't shut down. People like myself, or even Elon pretends to want this, to shut it down. Shut it down. I know there's consequences to that, but I think the problem is that it's like an addiction, guys. And every time they ram through all sorts of things that we don't even see, that aren't in our benefit, like right now, for the average person listening, go out and try to find the continuing resolution House GOP bill right now. Now, I spent time today. I looked on congress.gov. I looked on House GOP. Now, maybe it's somewhere that I wasn't able to find, which shows you that it's not meant to be seen. It's not. I looked it directly up, and it's not fault. You even ask one of the Grok or Brave, and it literally says that it's very difficult to find right now. How is that even possible that they're literally voting on something that we're supposed to pretend we're informed about, and they don't even have a written example of it we can read about? I'm willing to bet you, because it's riddled with things for Israel and all sorts of things that we don't get to see. Every moment, it seems that we're getting more opaque, less transparency from the most transparent government in the world. But Trump says, congratulations, Chuck Schumer, for doing the right thing. Like that's supposed to be basically at Thomas Massie, I think. But it says Republicans voted for POTUS, who attacks Thomas Massie while praising Chuck Schumer. Good job, morons. Better than Kamala. That's what they said, by the way. That wasn't me. That was the Post. Now, I think those are important, right? I think that's important to really highlight how obvious this game is and how obvious it is that it seems to be breaking down. Nowhere as obvious as this conversation. Now, we recently on the 13th did the show, the U.S. government's flagrant attack on free speech. Mohammed Khalil is just the beginning. Now, this is an important conversation, guys. I just can't stress that enough. It is foundational. What happened? Not even just because it's a precedent system. This is going to set a precedent that is alarming. Even though, by the way, there's been similar examples. It's about where we are right now. It's about the way it's being framed, and it's about how it's going to be applied. There are previous examples of people being deported under the context of just terrorism. But the point today is it's transparent that not only was that not even remotely the case, you can't even make that the case about the people that they're claiming actually said the things that they were generally moving over onto him. Western civilization and all these different claims. Those things in and of themselves are legally protected speech and ideology under whether you want to end this country or not. That's what free speech protects, your thoughts and your ideas. For them to say that we don't want that here, that means you don't believe in the Constitution. And look, again, maybe there's a case to be made for why that is what we should be doing today. I don't agree, but at least be honest about your stance. The problem is the definition, the line, very clear. The same things most of you would have been saying back during Biden's administration. Problem today is they're just saying bad guy, terrorism, Muslims, and all of a sudden these people jump up and say, do whatever you need. It's very simple. So we went over all this on the 13th. There's some things I want to follow up on today. Before we get to that, I thought this was fascinating. Now, I want to make a point about this in regard to swatting. And you might have seen this circulating. I got to be honest. Everything in me tells me there's something going on here. Just my gut. That doesn't mean I'm proving anything. But this whole thing with the swatting, first, let me just say this first. Swatting is very real, and it's absolutely wild to me that this is even still possible. Like the idea that you can just call in a fake call and send the SWAT team, which, by the way, why is a SWAT team even going to one of these locations for someone's home on some kind of check? And that they just do this, even though they know there's literally a thing called swatting. There's a name for it, and they just go anyway. Burst in the door and go, oh, I guess the call was wrong. Like, do you not see that that's almost like an allowable problem? Like, it's just wild. Either way, even if that's just incompetence, which is just as likely, it seems, it still happens. So nobody should be okay with that in any context. Not whether it's about reporting things about, I don't know, Mohammed Khalil's wife, for example, or Republicans claiming they're being targeted. Either way it goes, this should be called out as a problem. Now, obviously, first and foremost, we should probably prove this is actually happening, right? So this has been circulating. Weirdly, right after this, I mean, I was just talking about yesterday even, like this is a rapidly devolving conversation. They're losing control. They're being called out for things that they claim they're fighting for. And all of a sudden, oh my God, we're all being attacked. Teslas are being bombed. Oh my God, it's Republican, it's Democrat terrorism. It's like every buzzword. Now, even if it's actually happening, it's interesting. This takes the conversation away from genocide, away from literal destruction of this country, the removal of your rights, or rather the lack of acknowledgement of your rights. into we are now the story. We're not the media. We are the story. We are the ones we are the victims. We are being attacked. Here's the woke right as always, guys. And I mean the sense of making your victimhood the point. Now, if they were swatted, yeah, that's horrible. And nobody should be okay with that. That should be something that is called out, and that's a criminal act. And I hope we find the person who would do something like that, because you realize whether you agree with these people's ridiculous, childish, naive political opinions, they're still people, and they might have families. And the idea that you're going to bust in the door and potentially cause someone harm because of a joke or because you hate them, that's just vile. But let's be clear, this is happening on the partisans both ways. But here's what Cat Turd said today. I was just swatted again for the 4th time. As I tweeted earlier, and what's interesting is this is on the tail end of other people saying that. Something about this doesn't feel real to me. It says, I live in the middle of nowhere and know all the cops here because of the past swattings. They know it was just an immediate, and they knew what it was immediately and just called me and sent one officer who I just had. So they weren't swatted then. Swatted is when the SWAT team comes and breaks in your door or, costs you. No. So a cop came to your door and said somebody called about you. Not the same thing. I find that to be insane. Right there, that seems like a huge stretch because other people are saying that's happening. Oh, what you would have said, if you're being honest, is somebody tried to swap me, and it turns out it didn't happen because the cops knew me. But just to be clear, it says, really nice guy. I have my number and blah, blah, blah. My last 2 swatters are sitting in prison right now. This one will be joining them soon. Good. If they did it and that's a provable case, I'm glad, because that's a terrifying thing, and people like that should be charged with a crime. But here's the thing. It seems to be a round conversation right now. Now, I guess it's obviously, Democrats, just like Republicans, are all wrapped up in their mania around this whole thing and would act out in violence against the perceived other side. That's how this whole thing works. So it's not hard to wrap your mind around this actually happening. I'm sure somebody will be insulted by my just being critically objective about this. My point is that I think right now these people have been caught lying, all of them, in 45 different ways just since the selection process, over and over and over. So why we wouldn't at least go, maybe this might not be what it looks like. Or maybe somebody did it to them from their own side, or maybe they lied about any number of things. I'm not saying we know that. Obviously, these are possibilities. It's the same thing we did around any of these other horrible conversations when you just go, obviously, if we don't know, we don't know. We have to be able to consider all these things. How dare you consider the possibilities? But it says over a dozen more prominent Trump supporters, he says, this is Alex Jones, were viciously swatted last night. Over a dozen? So I'm starting to get the sense that other people are like, it was me too. Alex, I got swatted. And they're just tallying them up without any evidence, which, by the way, is what InfoWars does. Reports things without barely even checking. And that's coming from people that used to work for them. David Knight, Greg Reese, the TrueStream people. I'm blanking on, anyway, Grove, for example, plenty of others. As the desperate Democrat Party escalates their terrorism. See, so now you know it was Democrats? Do you have evidence of that, Alex? Do you know, or are you just assuming that because that's working for the agenda? You see my point? So even if it is actually happening, they're already turning this into some weaponized element because they want that to be the case. Show me the evidence that you know it was some Democrat machine. Wouldn't surprise me for a second. It's the same thing we keep seeing. Self-serving, making yourself the story about something going on. We have this example as well with the same people. Conservatives are getting swatted. Now, do you think that Insurrection Barbie verified any of this, or she just see Alex post it and assumed? You know as well as I. Now it says journalists are being killed. Now, yes, somebody was shot, and it worked for InfoWars. I don't think we have any real understanding of what happened or why or whether it was about journalism at all, but let's pretend that's the case because we're building a narrative about how we're the victim while we're ignoring children being starved to death and murdered right as you type this. Teslas are being burned. Okay, who was it? Do you know? Did they say why they did it? But yeah, let's build a case without knowing any of the facts. We are the media now. Students are being terrorized on campus. So now you're just broadly bringing this back to like the entire campus conversation, even though all of the evidence shows you that wasn't actually what was going on. So you have to begin to see if this is dishonest, then wonder if the other parts are too. The only way this stops is when people who engage in domestic terrorism get charged as such. Great. So burning a Tesla is now domestic terrorism. Like, you know how insulting it is for the very people who were the ones used to build the domestic terrorism dynamic from Biden. And now you have these people handing the baton from their hand to Trump, going, yes, use it. Call them domestic terrorists, as if that won't spring back around to anybody who they decide to not like that day. It's amazing. I mean, either these people are working for the destruction of this country, or are they so poorly informed and unaware of what's going on that they're destroying it in the interest of what they think they're fighting for. It's sad. It's like saying insurrectionists, like they've been doing the moment they sit down inside of some building, insurrection, and many of them actually stay with that. So if you were upset about them calling it insurrection on January 6th, why would you do it to them back? It means you're the same thing. To call someone a domestic terrorist without even knowing what happened because they did something against your perceived hero, even though it's not even close to the realm of the word terrorism, is, I mean, it's just dangerous. I mean, there's so many things you could say right there, but it is dangerous. It is the destroying what we believe is the fabric of this country. Now here, Mel points out, is Insurrection Barbie and others talking on a Spaces about trying to find his wife. Now, I just made this point. Laura Loomer saying, where is she? What's her name? Who is she? She's probably more radical. We should find out. She's probably doing terrorism. Like, literally. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what she was saying. Based on someone she doesn't know, doesn't even know her name, but you're willing to throw out libel and slander. She's probably radical. She's probably a terrorist. Why? Because she's Muslim and Laura Loomer's a disgusting, vile person. Mel says two things. These people are psychotic, and they're literally in Spaces planning ways to stalk and harass Mohammed Khalil's pregnant wife and her family, who, by the way, is an American. But that doesn't matter to these America First people because she's brown. It says, remember when I said Zionists are like abusive lovers, always trying to isolate America from all our friends and allies? Listen to the way they're talking about Britain. It's so insane.
I'm good. I just wanted to just assure you that, yeah, she didn't want to be identified yet. She is very well known who she is. Now,
that's what I was saying, right? So the reality of Loomer coming out and going, where is she? You know, it just shows obviously bad journalism, but it's really just about building the momentum of going after people. It's the same thing they would call domestic terrorism if the Democrats are doing it to them. Now, realize, guys, the real point is both those sides are dangerous and alarming and problematic. Right now, it's just very obvious to see that they're doing it right back around. So recognize it's the government, it's partisanship, and then recognize that they're the minority in the conversation.
Now, we want to go and check her parents because that looks like an arranged marriage. So I want to go back a little bit. This is where I am right now.
I mean, just think about how vile that is. You're talking about the parents now. Who cares if it's an arranged marriage? Because there's cultural differences, by the way. There's in India, for example, that's still reasonably prominent. And it's not some forced dynamic in many cases. It's a cultural difference. But the whole point is a whole different conversation. Yes, it also is forced in plenty of ways. Also happens in Israel, by the way. We won't talk about that, though. The point is that you're literally talking about stalking her family because you assume or think something, by the way, is not a crime, is not even relevant to the conversation. It's literally being driven by racism. And if for some reason you think any mention of racism is somehow woke, then you've lost the plot. Because obviously, you're ignoring it everywhere else too, seeing as how a genocide is being committed based on the idea of racism.
Oh, I'm sure it is an arranged marriage, right?
This is Insurrection Barbie responding.
So I want to go back a little bit. This is where I am right now.
Oh, I'm sure it is an arranged marriage, right? Are women allowed to choose those cultures? I don't know.
No.
See, that's the kind of journalism you can expect from We Are the Media now. And yes, they are. You absolute morons. Probably arranged marriage, probably right, because how are they even allowed? I mean, you must imagine the low intellect of people that listen to these people if that's where we're at.
But this is where I am right now.
Oh, I'm sure it is an arranged marriage, right? Are women allowed to choose those cultures? I don't know.
No. So you think he came here and
No, move on. Yeah, that's false, by the way. Yes, there's many different dynamics. There are people that have different religions and different culture within all these places. The idea is they're trying to make it sound like a repressive reality. And you want to compare what's going on there to any of these locations, Israel or any other examples of, how about Saudi Arabia? No, we don't care about those ones, though, because we're hypocrites.
that green card situation was set up right away?
No, I
Through
think
the
he was
marriage?
sent here by British intelligence. And I would like to know why, because in my mind, it's probably nefarious. But
Now, the reason they're saying that is because there's been information going around about a connection back to a British think tank dynamic. Now, you can look into it for yourself. The evidence to me does not in any way indicate that there's provable action about some kind of nefarious thing. This guy seems to be somebody who's been active in trying to fight for the rights of Palestinians or fight against oppression. Now, is it possible he's an agent for the British or the United States? Or even, of course it is. Of course it is. And no one out there who's honest should disregard a possibility. But they're building a case about somebody that, as far as I can tell, is based on subjective, hypothetical ideas that are being used to build in a direction for your agenda. That's who these people are.
Then again, I read too much stuff, so maybe I'm going the wrong way here, but that's what I think. Without any proof, obviously.
No, you're right. I mean, like if you, I mean, if you're gonna be, I have to be careful with my words. I don't think our relationships with the British is as great as everybody thinks it is.
I actually think it's way worse than it is, and nobody wants to talk about it. And it's
Well,
been that
especially
way
in the
since
IC
16.
community, especially in the
Right.
IC community. Like we quit sharing information.
Hey
with them,
Sam,
they
I
quit
heard we
sharing
may be
information with
missing.
us.
Hey Sam, I heard we may be missing an eye in the I-5s.
Maybe potentially.
God. I mean, is it insulting for me just to say that they all sound like they're pretty unintelligent? But that's, I'm a jerk. Call me a jerk. The bottom line, guys, you can listen to the content of what they're saying, the way they're discussing this, the lack of grammar. Clearly, these people are not who you should be listening to, but you can decide for yourself. The bottom line is that what they're trying to do right there is build this on nothing. It starts with the idea of who she is, her parent. We don't even know. And you're literally building this into, we think she's working for the British because based on subjective public information, by the way. Now, yes, obviously possible, but it's amazing how these mental magicians can't piece together the possibility that our entire government's being funded by the Israeli government, or that half the people working in this situation are working for some kind of intelligence apparatus. Or how about we just ignore the entire Epstein intelligence connection and just lurch into the idea of Teslas? Because good job, journalism. But here's what she said in response to this. And this person's kind of making fun of her, saying, oy vey, why are they inciting violence against poor Barbie? So people call this out, and she responds by claiming you're attacking her. Says, I have never once in my life said a word about stalking, harassing anyone's wife or family. You're literally having a spaces about trying to find out who they are and wonder whether it's an arranged marriage. What the hell would you call that? At least have the constitution to own what you're doing. And it says, anyone that has ever heard me speak in a space, which we just did, knows that. That's not true. The intent of this post from someone who has never interacted with me is actually meant to incite violence against the people referenced in the space. Is it? How exactly is pointing out what you're doing, inciting? Because what's interesting is, in a way, you're saying that, okay, well, I'm doing something wrong, therefore people attack me for it. I mean, you read it into you for yourself. It says very clearly, psychotic that are literally you can argue that calling her psychotic is not necessary, but that's not going to attack this person. Planning ways to stalk and harass their family. That's what they're doing. Remember when I said Zionists are abusive lovers, always trying to paint, listen to the way they're doing that. You want to walk me through how that's go after this person? It's commenting on what you're doing. But like I said, like the swatting point being done today, we're the victims. You pointing out, trying to highlight who the DOGE workers are, you're trying to get them killed. Aside the fact that we have every right to know who's working on these processes for our government. But, doxing is whatever you want it to be when you don't want us to see what you're doing. It says, meant to incite violence against me and the people in this, myself included, and at a time when people are being swatted. And begs the question, why? Quite the sidestep. I bet you don't know people are listening. I mean, look, you tell me if you think I'm wrong. This is very transparent to me. They are going after people like the rest of them because of ideology, because of a partisan agenda based on no evidence. They're literally trying to get people like this deported for saying things out loud and acting like they care about the Constitution. And then when somebody points out what they're doing is wrong, they say, you're attacking me. You are the woke left, guys, rather than the woke right. You are the very Democrat woke left that you think you're calling out. All of them. They are the woke right, and I've never seen it more obvious than today. Now, on that note, an overlap, before we get into the larger point about the First Amendment, free speech and all that, Aviva Klampus, one of the most obvious Zionist propagandists in this conversation, is now stepping into this conversation to use it for her own agenda, which is what they do. So this is actually crazy to me. She says Eden Alexander is an American boy who has been tortured, starved, and held in Gaza dungeon. Now, you might ask yourself how she knows that, right? Seeing as how he is still there. This is right now being discussed as March 14th. Hamas says it's willing to free American Israeli captive, but Israel expresses doubt. Now, it's funny. It says Hamas says it agreed, because it did, that conversation's public, to release Eden and turn over the bodies of 4 other hostages. Israel, and this might sound familiar, accused Hamas of psychological warfare, suggesting it wasn't close. You know, exactly like they did with the Bibas family that they are now caught lying about. We even just had the former defense minister openly telling you guys, we knew they were dead for 15 months and used them anyway.
And we knew at that time, I knew at that time, that some of them, including the Bibas kids, are not alive, unfortunately. Well,
now, I played the whole thing yesterday. The point is, guys, he literally like you just heard right there, they knew. And then they went on to use them for psychological warfare. And so what did they say when Hamas, for nothing, by the way, tried to return them, which even Lifshitz, the first hostage released, admitted publicly. They tried to return the Bibas family. And they said, no, psychological warfare, and then went back to war and said they broke the deal when that was what happened. So do you trust them now? Why would anybody? I mean, it seems this is like literally trusting a murderer to watch your children because they promise they won't do it again. You know, or how about a pedophile? Like, it's insane, the level of stupidity in this conversation. So my point, though, is he's still there, right? So this is still being discussed. So ask yourself how Viva Clampus knows he's been tortured and starved. She doesn't. And let's also take a step back and recognize that she has said that about every single one of them before they come home and tell you that they were treated kindly and they were fed and that they tried to protect them with their own bodies. And then they also watched hostages killed by IDF bombs. This monster knows what she's doing. She's absolutely trying to build, and here's the worst part. His captors refused to let the Red Cross in to see him, which, by the way, is provably false. The Red Cross is not allowed to get through with the Israeli blockade, and they've been very clear about that from the very beginning. It goes on to say, let alone grant his lawyer or due process. I mean, how clumsy is this? Then she goes on to say, yet, more voices are rallying to free Mohammed Khalil. Mohammed Khalil, a man who openly supports terrorists. No, he does not. And then to demand Eden's release. This is so gross. I mean, they're shameless. So realize, what are you talking about, a lawyer and due process? They're literally in a destroyed Gaza occupation territory, right? Where they're not allowed to leave. They're being starved. There's no water, electricity. And you're going, why not due process? I mean, you're an absolute moron. At the end of the day, I think she's preaching to a group of people that won't even know that doesn't make sense. Only to make a clumsy point about Mohammed Khalil because it's important to them right now because they're all losing. Everyone's seeing who they are. I just think that's insane. So to lie about what you think is happening, even though every other person's come out and shown you they weren't tortured, and if they were starved, it's because they're not letting food in, and most of them were fed anyway, even while there's Palestinian children starving in the streets, and then go on and make a case about lawyers and due process while you don't give any of that to a single person in your actual torture dungeons in Israel, as your own people are calling out. I mean, it gives me a physical feeling. It's revolting that this even exists in the world, but obviously also makes you motivated because this is the kind of thing we have to fight. Now, this is important to reiterate, guys. Clip this out, highlight this, use the source links, because it's everywhere right now. From J.D. Vance, Tom Cotton, and everybody in the administration to basically half of this the Republican MAGA conversation right now. Literally dying on the hill of this is not about free speech, while they're undermining exactly that. Now, just again, showing you the links we included yesterday, and do your due diligence, guys. This is just looking up for Brave. Do constitutional rights apply to illegal aliens? And it says yes. Constitutional rights do apply to undocumented immigrants, also known as illegal aliens. The U.S. Constitution guarantees certain rights to all people living within the jurisdiction of the United States, regardless of their immigration status. Now, that's just Brave, right? Of course, it could be wrong. The point is there's foundational rulings, even one from Scalia that we pointed out yesterday, 1993, that makes this undeniably clear. This is just from a law group simply pointing out, yes, the Constitution protects all people living in the United States, regardless of immigration status. Most constitutional provisions apply based on personhood. That's the main point, not citizenship. Any person, X, Y, and Z. In other words, if an individual is physically present in the United States, they are entitled to the protections granted by the Constitution. Now, again, maybe you disagree with that. Maybe you think that shouldn't be the case, but let's be clear. It is right now the case. That is the legal reality of the situation. So if you disagree, then make that argument. For you guys to pretend that it's just not the reality either shows how wildly uninformed you are or how dishonest you are. Everyone needs to call this out. This needs to be a huge point that we rally behind because it's the reality. Here's the Fifth Amendment. And this is one of the points that's roundly cited by the Supreme Court. No, it's not about a citizenship status or an American. It's about any person. That's how it's framed. No person, the Fifth Amendment says, no person shall be held to answer for capital. Otherwise, it goes on and on. All the things you remember in the Fifth Amendment. Then it goes on to say, nor shall any person be subject to the same offense twice, double jeopardy, or be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Here is law and crime, same kind of thing. And this cites some of these. I'll show you. The main one I think is important, especially around deportation, is Reno versus Flores, 1993. But there's many examples in this. There's more than even I highlighted. This just simply says the same point for the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution, ratified in 1868 after the end of the Civil War, specifically states, quote, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor to deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now realize, it doesn't say, it's any person. I don't even know how you could pretend that doesn't apply to exactly what that says. This says, the court asserted that, and this is 1886, asserted, quote, the guarantees of protection contained in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution extend to all persons within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States without regard to differences of race, of color, or nationality. It can't get more clear than that. 1993, Justice Scalia wrote in Reno versus Flores that the courts have well established that, this is the quote, well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens, illegal or otherwise, to due process of law in deportation proceedings. Due process is the legal concept requiring that all proceedings be fair and that an individual be given notice of the proceedings and an opportunity to be heard before the government acts to take away one's life, liberty, or property. That's what they're right now refusing, even if they end up going in front of a judge, to Khalil. Because up until today, the lawyer hasn't even spoken to him. And on top of that, no one's being seen. This is behind a wall. This is a secret trial, it seems. And on top of that, the whole process, there was no warrant presented. They did not identify themselves. This is becoming exactly what we've always pretended we're fighting in this country, if not long since been there. The Flores case gave rise to 1997 settlement requiring the government to release children to their parents, a relative or a licensed program within 20 days of apprehension, an arrangement that the Trump administration has so far unsuccessfully sought to modify through the courts. Now, there's 100 more examples you could find. It is the reality, guys. It's patently clear. The problem is that people like this, who I could guarantee are smart enough to know better and probably already do, are lying to you. But I can't tell you for sure that they don't. The bottom line is if they do know, they're lying. But think about how, either way, think about how embarrassing it would be to find out that Megyn Kelly doesn't even understand the Constitution. She says, for those wondering what Mahmoud Khalil did, he was the lead negotiator of a group unleashing this lawless terror. Nope. Provably false. In every possible way, we've gone over it 100 times. From the evidence of the videos of the central location they claim was a hotbed of anti-Semitism, where you've got Holocaust survivors and Jewish people chanting on Passover. It is ridiculous. She says, we would have been the one demanding that university divest from Israel, or they would continue the lawlessness. Not a free speech case. Yes, it is. Even if everything you just said was true, it would still be a free speech case. That's what's so incredible about this. Then you realize that they're lying about everything. This guy says, Mays, who has 471,000 followers, says, no, it's not a free speech case. Not sure why people are confused about it. He was the lead hostage negotiator, pretty much. Think about that. Hostage negotiator? You are so shockingly uninformed. And I said, you're all exposing either shocking ignorance or willful deception to the detriment of all you claim to be fighting for. I cited that case exactly. Because realize all that's what they've done is already proven that they are ignoring his rights, which means they could ignore anybody's rights so they choose to, which I think has always been the case. Here is Vance being trotted out to do the same thing as the rest of them. He says, American citizens have different rights from people. No, you don't. I can stop you right there. Not true. He's going on to say, from people who have green cards, It's not fundamentally about free speech. It's literally about free speech. This is what should be so alarming for honest people, left or right. This guy, whatever he actually works for, whatever side he's actually on, is absolutely either too stupid to know he's wrong or so dangerous that he's trying to destroy a foundational aspect of this country. And either way, that should be terrifying. You realize there's not some separate listing of rights for people with green cards. It's the same Constitution that applies, as we've already proven to you, to anybody present in this country. Now, yes, there are simple changes in regard to, let's say, an illegal, like somebody murders somebody. There are examples of differences in regard to that law. The point is, especially with a green card, and especially when you can prove that no crime was even committed, other than if you want to make it out to be some kind of a vandalism or whatever you want to claim happened in a building that they were allowed to go in and then didn't leave. None of that reaches to any remote level to claim terrorism to try to reach some past precedent of removing somebody for terrorism. This is insane. He's trying to make you think that people like that don't have the same rights, and they provably do. Now, this is interesting, guys, and this is what it looks like to show. This is just being logically objective or accurate, consistent. This person says, "I support the detention and deportation of Mohammed Khalil." Pass it on, citing this Israeli propagandist. And they're all just doing it. You can just see it continues like that. They're citing somebody and passing it on. So the point, Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, who I've shared before, he, very much calling out what's going on with Zionism. He says, "I support the detention and deportation of all dual citizens and all Zionists." Pass it on. Now, here's important to say. I get what he's doing. You could very well argue that he doesn't even truly mean that. He's doing it to make a point. But my point would be that that's the same problem in reverse, right? If somebody's going to be arrested, deported, well, then we should prove why. There should be a crime. There should be evidence presented. They should be told why they're being arrested, right? They should have a right to defend themselves, whether they're an illegal alien or not, because that's what due process is, applied to everybody. And that should be fleshed out. It should be public, whether dual citizen or not, okay? My issue is dual citizen from any country, not religion, any country, and being a part of the government. That has to be discussed. There's an obvious point at which there may come a time where they are split between the countries. That's obvious. It's more obvious when you have so many Israeli influential people that are overtaking this country. That's obviously a problem. Not because they're Israeli, but because that shows a possible issue for national security. It's basic. Just make it about China, and you guys would all agree. It's so insane how obvious this is. The point is that dual citizens just existing, I mean, I don't know how to deport them just because they're dual citizens, I think is the same problem. That's why I kind of get the sense he's just trying to make a point here. But we have to be consistent about this. Doesn't matter what country they're from. If they're breaking the law, they're breaking the law. That's dealt with. But even if they're breaking the law, that does not therefore mean they can be deported because you don't like the way they did it. There are laws. Now, Insurrection Barbie shows again how much they don't understand or that they're trying to deceive you. She says, "Will the Ku Klux Klan be allowed to protest on Columbia's campus wearing white?" Yep. Now, maybe not. Maybe in today's context, they might be. This same thing might boil up, but understand this is actually a very prominent conversation that's been had many times. And basically right now, based on and here's the important point to frame this. Right now, what happened to Khalil should be absolutely not possible, right? If we believe that everything's exactly the way we're told it is. Clearly, that's not the case. Same point here. Based on the way we believe the law exists right now, then yes, they're absolutely allowed to protest on campus. And you can look up the precedents. You can look up what the random brave answer says, and all of them are saying yes, they are. The point is, she's just trying to make a point that she probably didn't even care to look into because she thinks she already knows. That can't be possible, so therefore, you're wrong. Millions of followers, these people. And it says, so why would the pro-Palestine protesters be allowed to protest? Right there, you're already proving that you don't believe in the rights that you claim you're fighting for. And it says, decked out with their Hamas garb. And she means, kiffas and Palestinian flags, because she's either that stupid or that dishonest. And it says, handing out Hamas media office literature. See, towing the line. That's not true. That's a clumsy Tom Cotton level lie, making it out to be because they said things that we claim are Hamas, therefore you took it right from their website. Nobody proved that. And you can actually prove that what they're putting on those things they handed out were just things that you can prove are accurate based on the conversation, like the legitimate act of armed resistance, like the reality of the history of occupation. But see, those to them, because they're either uninformed or dangerous, are all fake. But again, to make it as clear as possible, especially since I said dangerous, they have a right to those ideas, dangerous or not. Acting in a way that is a crime, those already exist, guys. What they're doing in reverse is trying to say that these ideas on the other side, far less dangerous because they're literally going free speech, are the problem and have to be deported because those ideas are violence. Again, you are the woke right. I said, you are so uneducated on the very topics you're screaming about that it's sad. You're embarrassing yourself. I mean that. Like, that wasn't some snipe. That's exactly what's going on. Now, generally speaking, the Ku Klux Klan can protest at U.S. colleges, like literally anybody can. And it says, but their activities are often subject to scrutiny and legal challenges. The reality, though, again, if you're just drawing a very clear line about the law, this has already been gone over more than once. And you can read more about it here or the different examples of the past cases. The Ku Klux Klan's right to protest was actually upheld more than once, by the way, but in a landmark case on Brandenburg versus Ohio. Now, I'm not saying I think that is something I support. Racism is the same problem. My point is that anybody, whether racist or not, it's just ideas. If they're going out there and hitting people with bats, arrest them. If they're just walking out there and going, things I believe in, I don't care how crazy it sounds, that is the line we have to draw. Or in the sense of how crazy or like a lot, what they're saying might be bad. It's the same conversation. As Jimmy just said the other day, guys, as always, it's about the worst speech. If you don't stand by the worst possible speech, then you don't believe in free speech. And we're seeing that people like this are either being paid not to or never actually did. But read through it again, guys. This goes back a long way. I mean, most of you who actually care about this and have been following this platform or, actually educating yourself for longer than 30 seconds know all of this. It's a foundational case. I mean, this has gone on for a very long time. Now, yes, a lot has changed in the world. Maybe that's a problem that we recognize, whether it's Ku Klux Klan or you screaming about free Palestine. They're pretending that they can draw lines right now. That's what we're standing for right here. In this conversation with this show, the line has to be drawn. We cannot allow the Trump administration or Biden or anybody else to drive us forward against our own interests because terrorism or whatever the excuse is. It's principles, guys. Now, here is a blog post about this from 2017, the 3 Supreme Court cases involving the Ku Klux Klan. And it's cemented in history. You can read through them for yourself. I just want to include it for you to do more due diligence. The obvious answer is there. It's very basic. Now, Laura Loomer said, and people wonder why some people have strong views about Jews. As a Jew, I condemn these people. These Jews are an example of why anti-Semitism exists. Oh my God, I feel like I could do an entire show on that one ridiculous claim. I mean, the idea is obviously anti-Semitism exists because people are driven to hate Jewish people, right? And of course, ignoring the fact that that's not even what anti-Semite actually means, but the game begins a long time ago. The point, though, is that if you want to acknowledge the most obvious example of driving anti-Semitism, that's the ADL, AIPAC, Israel in general. Now, that's what Haaretz is saying. That's what a lot of people in Israel are saying. That's what a lot of people in the Jewish communities around the world are saying. Now, I believe that's actually close to the majority at this point. The point is that she either doesn't know that exists or doesn't care about their opinion as she jams in her racist ideas. Or really the idea is as she's literally being the very anti-Semitic that she claims that everybody else is doing. It's insane. Because these are Jewish people. This is called Jewish Voices for Peace or Jewish Voice for Peace. I always do that. And I already told you guys, this is what I said would happen. Remember, I said, what are they going to do? It's Trump's lobby. It's a Jewish protest, but get ready for them to call it. And here we are. They didn't even give it 24 hours. And she's screaming about why they're a problem. So as always, it shows you that it's about Zionism, not Judaism. I simply said, as we discussed last night, this Jewish organization is being attacked simply because they're fighting for what Loomer pretends to fight for while selling out. It's always been about Zionism, not Judaism, as this clearly demonstrates in the show from yesterday is included. Here's how somebody responded, James Lee. He said, I have to disagree. These are peace-loving Jews. Zionism is actually the biggest source of anti-Semitism. See, because he cares, because he's not an idiot. He looked into the information and he's been breaking this down. Even though, I mean, we disagree on some things. James Lee, I think we agree on more than we don't. But overall, I noticed that he has the integrity to stand up at moments like this and say, that's not true. I appreciate that. Here is Burning Orchids saying, no, Zionist Jews like you are why it's dramatically on the rise. A reminder of what Laura and this, what's his name? It's that propagandist we were just talking about, Elal Jacobi. A reminder of what Laura and he support and what they're ultimately trying to distract you from. This was just the latest child casualty in Israel's relentless ethnic cleansing. This is what Laura Loomer and Eyal want your American tax dollars to go to. We pointed to this yesterday, I think. 7-year-old Palestinian boy was just killed with the Israelis. This was widely discussed. This was, I think even corporate media was talking about this. In a targeted attack, not in that way, but showing that the child was killed in Gaza. Supposedly while this is not actually still happening and no one's talking about it. Now, the important thing here is realize that these two literally just did a podcast together about why this is still okay. What's going on is okay. And, yay, Israel. That's what it basically was. This guy is a literal Zionist propagandist. Now, Greenwald quote tweets what this Fox News show had to say. This one actually floored me because you have to realize what Loomer is doing is just clumsy and gross. What they're doing on this platform is, look, if you stood back and looked at this, this is what they would have called the woke left. This is what they would have said woke about. If this was a Democrat show talking about you claiming, what was the misgendering or whatever, that it was, remember what they said? It was violence, right? Your words are threatening. And so therefore, okay, well, here's Fox News for you, ladies and gentlemen, which is basically what Cat Turd and Insurrection Barbie and the rest are pushing for right now, which is that what they're doing is violence, therefore get them. This is the woke right.
So you hear them chanting, free Mahmoud, free them all. I'm wondering, Ari, who are they all? And if the world is watching our nation right now and they know us as a bastion of free speech, so on and so forth.
Can you not notice, by the way, how everyone in positions of media and government, the free speech, it's free speech, whatever, that the whole thing, free speech, like all of them, from the border czar to the media, they clearly despise your free speech. It's just hilarious the way it's a passing point for them these days.
If the world is watching our nation right now and they know us as a bastion of free speech, so on and so forth.
Yeah, whatever.
When you hate, when people feel under threat because of what you're saying, that's actually not protected speech.
Wow.
And
wow.
Look at some of the signage in here. They hate Israel. They hate Jewish Americans. They are anti-American.
Oh my God. First of all, there's a Jewish group, and what they're saying is, as you can see, free Mahmoud, free Palestine, fight Nazis, not, what did it say? Fight Nazis, not students. And all they can do is go, they hate Jewish people. How do you not see how dumb that is? And on top of that, as Jewish people, and on top of that, the most important part, if it is threatening, it is not protected speech. That's what they're all doing right now. Violence, terrorism. It does it's all narrative. The bottom line is if you break the law, there's a law for that. There's a crime, there's a law for that. This is speech being criminalized because they say it's threatening. Well, isn't that, here, I should actually play this again, seeing as how it's so hilarious to me that either he never actually thought this or he's probably pretty embarrassed. Oh, did I get rid of it? Oh, I think I did because it was the earlier one. Shoot. Hold on. No, I'm not going to be able to find it, actually. Shoot. That Ben Shapiro clip where he's basically saying exactly, you can't conflate violence and words because that's a slippery slope. And that's literally what they're doing right now. I just simply said, oh, that's the way to find it. Hold on. Do it real quick if I can. Because what's important about this is the hypocrisy around it. Oh my gosh, is Twitter not loading? Or do we just lose connection? Huh. Let me know in the chat if you guys can still hear me. Let me know in the chat if you guys can still hear me. I'm wondering if I just lost connection somehow. No, it looks like it's on. Okay, you hear me. How strange. Well, and maybe Twitter's down again. Wouldn't that be interesting? Anyway, now I can't grab it because I was going to grab it from Twitter. The bottom line is, guys, to come out and say that is a problem. Well, it doesn't just change because suddenly the conversation is different. That's why principles are a thing. It's the same principle. The point is he either never believed that or he suddenly changed for his own personal reasons, which is just gross and dumb either way. So for them to say that if it's threatening, that it's not protected, even though I guess my point from this earlier, that's literally what is protected. That is everything in that context. If you are saying things out loud, that's protected under free speech. What they're trying to do is make the woke right case for why, if it's threatening to us in this context around Israel, then we'll shut you down. Glenn Greenwald, who is a constitutional lawyer, says, LOL, Fox's Harris Faulkner calls a group of Jewish protesters anti-Semitic and anti-American, by the way, even though what they're doing is in quintessentially American, and says that they hate Jewish Americans, she says. She also says that hate speech is not protected speech. The longtime premise of liberal censorship is now increasingly popular on the pro-Israel right. You gotta love how dumb that is, even though it's terrifying. We just need to begin to recognize that a lot of these people are dishonest, not just wrong, dishonest. Here's Nancy Mace. The anti-Semitic leftists are showing themselves. Right. Again, same point, by the way. Many conservatives now scream anti-Semite the way they complain the leftists screamed racist. It's just so obvious. In a way, I kind of feel embarrassed for some of these people because I don't know if they all know what they're doing, but I'm of the mind that a lot of them do. Most of them do. That's my opinion anyway. So here's Laura, again, just doubling down on this all day. Happening now. Hundreds of Marxist. see that it's the way it's like the evolving, patching together the narrative all day. Do you know them all? Are you aware of their personal mindset? I mean, here's the crazy thing. If you go back and actually, care to look like a journalist would, do your due diligence, you'll find that this is not unique to one side. There's right, there's left, there's people that are Christian, they're Muslim, they're Jewish. That's the point. Now, that's not because it's always the case, but it's right now, it's about solidarity around stopping that genocide. That doesn't mean that some of them might have that idea, or even the idea that you think Marxist is inherently bad. Like, it's all very partisan. I personally think that any of these extreme ideas all lead to the same direction. But the point is she's saying that hundreds of them from Jewish Voices for Peace, a leftist Jewish group that advocates for Palestinians, has just stormed the lobby of Trump Tower. Like I told you, they would hype up. Even though what they did is they walked in, they sat down, they started chanting. Now, yeah, is it a crime? Well, it's an interesting conversation, right? Because the door's open. It's a public location. They came in and sat down. Now, if you want to try to make it a case that they're trespassing, well, then charge them with that. Most of these people are willing to take that charge for a small slap on the wrist for their protest, right? But see, the game is to make it about violence and terrorism, which shows you they are the woke right. They're doing exactly what Glenn just said. They're doing what the liberals did that they all screamed about. It's how the partisan game works. And it says, to protest President Trump's deportation of the pro-Hamas, no, he wasn't, Palestinian national Mahmoud Khalil. Leftist Jews are not America first. This screeching person says, as a Jew, I condemn these leftist Jews. I support Trump and deportation of Mahmoud Khalil. She's just tapping into exactly what you think she is, guys. And this is what was interesting, by the way. Somebody in the last conversation said, how long before a Jewish Israeli student? Because they're in there, guys. There's people from Israel. There's people that it's everyone in the world, as far as I can tell, seems to, in many contexts, be able to call this out. How long until a Jewish Israeli student gets deported back to Israel for protesting Israeli occupation and genocide? Now, it's an interesting point, but I bet it will never happen because that creates, a problem for Israel. Obviously, I don't think they'll ever let that happen. They'll just ignore that part of the conversation and go after the Americans because it's about the American side of the conversation. But it's an interesting point, isn't it? There's contradictions everywhere. Now, Ben, as you've seen in the past, this was back in October 2023. And what's even more interesting is this person's post is now deleted. Actually, so that's right. Damn it, this is down. Is Twitter down? Let me know in the chat if you guys see Twitter down. It's not loading for me anyway. Maybe that means I've been censored. Let me see. Twitter down. No, yeah, it's definitely spiking. Look at that. So we'll find out, I guess, tomorrow how they decide to make the case for this. I mean, did they ever even prove that it was actually from Ukraine IP addresses? It's sad how much people take face value statements from the government, which is what it is, no matter how much you pretend they're not. But my point is they'll use this as they see fit. But Ben Shapiro in 2023, and this says from a suspended account, literally because this account was calling them names. Ben Shapiro says it was Jewish Voice for Peace, sitting in that congressional building, sitting peacefully chanting. That's all it was. And he goes, useful idiots for Hamas. Plus, these trash people don't even know how to wear a tallit. They look like Nancy Pelosi. And so you're attacking Jewish people because they don't do what you like, because they have different opinions than you. It's gross, guys. It's disgusting. This is everything he claims. This is woke right. Same thing. You are showing it's about Zionism, and you're using identity politics to attack people for your agenda. You are the woke left. But the point was calling them trash. Oh, man. Oh, that was the other one. These are going to stop loading for me. So I called it out as well and simply said, hey, Ben, is this person who was a Holocaust survivor, are they trash and a useful idiot for Hamas too, as you call Jewish Voice for Peace, simply for calling for a ceasefire? It is rapidly becoming clear to anyone paying attention who the real useful idiot is here, Zionist Ben Shapiro. Now, this account was also removed. Just think about how much has been removed as we go forward. Like, this is cultivating a very clear picture of our own history. But on top of that, this is from April 28, 2024. This was right in the midst of the Columbia conversation. This is working mass, and this is one of the many things that we're proven in the midst of all this, despite people like the Stefanik or Stefanik, or however you want to say your name, lying about this. Working mass can confirm that the anti-Semitic chants were shouted not by encampment organizers, but by pro-Israel counter-supporters. Every one of these things were documented left and right, but these people are pushing for an agenda. That's why they're lying about free speech. That's why they're going after Americans. That's why they're continuing to support a genocide. How many more examples do we need to recognize that they don't support America, that they're supporting something else? The point, how many times can this be shown before it's called what it is? How can you claim it's about Jew hatred when they're marching next to major Jewish organizations and Holocaust survivors? Are you also going to call Holocaust survivors trash and useful idiots, Ben? Same point. You could prove that they were lying about this. Now, here is another Fox News example of another member of the Republican Party telling you that your free speech is not really in existence. Not how we understood it anyway. He says, Republicans crying about hateful speech. Just like Glenn said, that was the rally call of the left in regard to shutting down hate speech. This is the same conversation. Now, they said hateful speech. Like, that's not obvious, right? A mere image of liberal censorship cries from the past several years is incredibly predictable, but still extra galling after all the free speech grandstanding they just got done doing on false pretenses.
We have K through 12 and we have higher ed. We've got to treat both of them different. But when it comes to protesters, we got to make sure we treat all of them the same. Send them to jail. Free speech is great, but hate free speech is not what we need in these universities, and they don't need to be doing things that they're preaching from Hamas about anti-Semitism.
They can't even speak properly. My God, these guys are ridiculous. Like, he either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he is fighting against this country. You realize free speech is great and all. That's the kind of thing you get from these elitists. They are desperate to remove this from you. It feels like that to me. So he pushes for you to say, well, that's great and all, but we can't allow hateful speech. So meet the woke right. Now realize, guys, I'm making a point with that. It's just your government. Your government has been finding ways to use the two-party illusion to get to this position. Now they're working to destroy this stuff for you, for them, against you. If we can't recognize by now what this looks like, and whether it's the financial surveillance or the technocratic drive or the medical fraud, or just never stops, but it just keeps screaming that you're winning, maybe it'll all disappear. Now, the Free Thinkers Project says, it's kind of crazy how both sides, and that means not much of anything, there's a ruling class and there's everybody else, are comfortable demonizing half of America on any given issue. And this is one of the things that I always think is, I have such little respect for, if any. The idea that it's like the Democrats, the Republicans. Like, you are the child in the room. You are the lowest conversation in this, where you just broad stroke, broad brush, whatever you want to call it, same point, anybody who is in a disagreement with you as the other. You know, it's the same thing they're doing with Hamas and Palestine. It's the same thing they're doing with every conversation where they want to create a false binary, because they know for decades, really. I mean, longer, but my context is just like in regard to, you could make it like the technology forward for what we're really talking about, but for a long time, they have been using those to keep you trapped. The most obvious is the two-party illusion. But he says that they're comfortable demonizing half of America on any given issue, and at the same time, gaslighting the people who happen to agree with them to such an insane and ridiculous degree. And he says, and yet they are all allowed to get away with it instead of facing a citizenry armed with pitchforks and rope and torches. Our tweets have done nothing. I mean, I disagree with nothing, but I agree it's feeling like it's insurmountable at this point. But let's realize that very well could be how they want you to feel as this all begins to collapse as a desperate, cornered animal. But, the point is we shouldn't stop regardless. At least that's not in me to stop fighting for what I believe in. They're continuing to crack down on free speech, both sides. Republicans just took the baton from the Democrats. Everyone can see that now, right? I'd like to believe that. And then I'll just play this again, since this is, I think, an important clip to understand this is not new. And don't forget, here's the border czar of Trump's administration telling you that there's limits on speech, and really making it about what's with Mohammed Khalil, which shows you it's not about theater and a fire in a theater. It's about pretending what you say is a threat to national security, and then we could boot you the moment we make that claim, right? If you were outraged about Obama and things they said in the same context, then you should care about this. If you don't, you're a hypocrite.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
And I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people. Those are stupid.
Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to, dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
It doesn't benefit anybody. Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
Yep. It's pretty simple. It's worth considering that he's doing that to hide something else, but I don't have any evidence of that, right? It's just another possibility. Be objective about it. Look at the information. Now, here's what Michael Tracy said. This isn't about free speech is such an absurd deflection in regard to Khalil. Admin officials have made abundantly clear, and this is the point that you can read, actually, they have it even clipped out right here, but we showed you yesterday, directly from Trump's administration's own mouth, the mouth of the appointee that was speaking on the record. He said, the allegation here is not that he was breaking the law. Very clear. And they went on to make it about national security. So you can't make this about action or even breaking the law. It's about threats using speech, or rather the claim that they say you're a threat because of your speech. This is a fundamental, clear-cut case of free speech. And he says admin officials have been abundantly clear that that he's been targeted and punished for his political speech. The same things that they attack other countries for doing, Iran and everybody else. Hypocrites. They've openly announced it. Rarely has anything been more obviously about free speech. I agree. David Strom says, wait, he's being deported because he said the COVID virus was cooked in a Wuhan lab? I don't even know where he's trying to go with this. He goes, I thought it was because he, as a foreigner, was promoting Hamas and the destruction of Western civilization while occupying a campus, vandalizing and spreading Hamas propaganda. I don't even know what he thought the COVID point was about, but the point is he then lays out the narrative. And this is what's so funny about where this conversation goes into. And for all we know, these are all bots. It's hard to tell. But what's funny is that he lays out the narrative from the administration, which all of it is false. Like at least unverifiable in regard to the Western civilization. But even if he did say that, it would still be protected under free speech. On top of that, it's a screenshot. It's the best they all can do. You show me where they presented more evidence. People like Tracy or Candace Owens have been screaming about this. The guy yesterday said, I'll give $1,000 to anybody who can make this claim or prove it. Crickets. It's not there, guys. And they are all screaming you down for a partisan agenda. But then Michael says, since you're so certain that he was promoting a destruction of Western civilization, whatever that means, why don't you cite a piece of direct evidence in which he called for the destruction of Western civilization? Note, direct evidence does not mean random Instagram posts or a screenshot of one that we can't actually verify. This person says, this boot-looking clown is simply spouting what Fox News told him to think. Now, he's referring to the guy up top. But think about how crazy it is that we're talking about battling back and forth with two sides regurgitating the same. And this person says, and you are spouting MSNBC crap that nobody watches because it's all propaganda. I just think it's hilarious. Because obviously what you know my opinion. I've laid it all out. But what I think is so fascinating is you get the false paradigm binary that in both sides, how many times have we covered this, are either half the story or both lying to you. And the point is, this person highlights the reality and simply says, I don't watch MSNBC. You're just a moron. It shows that the allegation is not that he broke the law. But it's not, again, it's not about in this point was simply about the interesting back and forth of the people online who both choose to ignore the other side and blindly trust theirs. And that's the problem. I really don't want to believe that's the majority. I don't think it is. I hope it's not. Now, going forward on what's been happening, this is from late yesterday, and it says DHS agents search 2 Columbia residencies as the university disciplines students for ongoing protests. So as we told you, guys, this is building into something bigger. Now, just like we told you with the border conversation where we already had evidence of veterans and Americans being wrapped up, accosted, arrested without charge under the guise of going after legal immigrants, one of which we focused on, who was he was a veteran. He's Puerto Rican. He was an American citizen, and he was arrested, and they refused to acknowledge his rights until later they proved he was him, and they let him go. The point is, that's the unaccountability of this. There's no warrants, there's no process, just like with him. They didn't present a warrant, they didn't address themselves. So now, as we already showed you, they have secret investigations ongoing. They are going after people for speech. Ongoing protests. Now, people have lost their degrees. They've been suspended. I mean, this is going crazy, all built on an absolute lie. This is from New York Times, and I want to show you how they changed the headline, which I always think is crazy. Posted yesterday, and it says, Columbia disciplines students who occupied campus building last year. But it's the same idea, guys. Like, if you go back to this conversation, is anybody going to actually ever prove what the crime really was here? Are you going to show me that they actually broke the law? If you're going to make it about the law, then at best it's probably trespassing. Overall, what we have is a lot of back and forth and a lot of narrative. Is anybody ever going to prove anything in this conversation? Are we going to see evidence produced in front of a judge? I mean, when does that actually happen? Apparently, it might be happening now behind closed doors. How will we ever trust something like that? But my point is in the public conversation. Everyone's choosing their side. Now, here's what's crazy. This is later. The New York Times changes the headline the next day, which I still just find wild that it even happens. Like, all they do is do this. Updated March 14th. There's no note. There's no example. That's not supposed to be how journalism works, but we know we're well past actual journalism here. But it says Trump demands major changes in Columbia discipline and admissions rules. A letter outlining immediate next steps arrived less than a week after the administration said it was canceling $400 million in contracts. So just as always, like the last clay, whether about speech or anything else, they're now conditioning these funding. Now, again, I'm of the mind that no school should be getting funding like this. The point is they're not required to give this. The point, though, is that's their decision. But if they're then going to condition it on things that then become a rights dynamic, then that is still a problem. So when they made it about anti-Semitism, they made it a free speech issue. But the point in this is that they're now demanding changes in regard to people. So now they're going to go after what they're demanding is people be removed, be sued, or rather suspended, or degrees be lost, or then be deported. All because something is demanding that. I mean, ask yourself how this makes sense, especially since we should know, if you're actually paying attention or you're actually aware of the constitutional rights that we inherently have, that everything they're doing here is alarming. I mean, this goes back to secret police kind of stuff, secret investigations, barely identifying yourselves, rushing into people. Like, what's the premise here? What's the the word I'm looking for? What is the evidence basis for making these investigations? Why did you go to these people's doors in the first place? We have the mind now where police can just come search your home for no reason? I mean, realize how alarming this is getting, guys. This is where I think we've always been, but they're pulling the mask off. Here is CBS News. Columbia University expels some of the students who seized a building last year. But see, that's how they seized a building. Suspends others. Well, here is an article from Prem Thacker. DHS agents descended on Columbia's campus again to serve 2 warrants. At least this time they had warrants. Clearly they know we're paying attention. Now it says, less than a week after immigration authorities detained Columbia students' protest leader, Mahmoud Khalil, Department of Homeland Security agents were back on the university's campus to serve 2 search warrants. Now, I'd love to see what that was. What is the justification for these search warrants? I guarantee it's national security. And that's the problem. That's where we're going, where they can just claim whatever they want under some foggy guise of, it's the same thing you would have said about a Biden situation if you are on the right. If Biden started kicking people's doors in and going, national security, would you have been okay with that? It's always the same point to make. If so, then well, that's terrifying, but at least you have a consistent opinion. Recognize the hypocrisy. The problem is that right now, these people are it's being wrapped up in the idea of violence or terrorism support when all these people did was protest against genocide. Now it says, I am writing heartbroken to inform you that we had federal agents from the Department of Homeland Security in 2 university residences tonight. No one was arrested or detained, which even more so shows you that it was baseless, right? They went there under some guise of whatever they thought they were looking for. No reasonable cause, so they left him there. Right there alone, somebody should follow up with a lawyer and call that out. Columbia interim president Katrina Armstrong wrote in an email to the university community late Thursday. Now, she appears to be the one who is already supporting the former Israeli spy who is the current the dean? Yeah, Khalil's dean is a former Israeli military intelligence officer, used to work on behalf of the U.S. in regard to in Israel, a representative U.S. for Israel-UN dynamics, and then married the UN representative of Israel. Nothing to see here, and she's currently at the center of this conversation about what they're doing from the dean's position at Columbia University. The point is the president also went along with all of this. So just keep that in mind as this is being said. But it says, no items were removed and no further action was taken. Federal agents from the DHS served Columbia University with 2 judicial search warrants signed by a federal magistrate judge authorizing DHS to enter non-public areas of the university and conduct searches of 2 student rooms. Armstrong wrote that the university was obligated to comply with the warrants and that university public safety was present at all times. Well, see, maybe that's why something went different, because last time there was no announcement, there was no notification, there was no warrant. I think they just went in and grabbed and left. Now there's people paying attention, which shows you that they know what they're doing is wrong. Now, it says DHS's presence on the campus came just hours after it was revealed that the Trump administration, through the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the General Services Administration, delivered a letter to Columbia with a list of actions it demanded the university take before it would consider reinstating $400 million in grant funding that it cut from the school over what it claimed was university's inaction in addressing anti-Semitism. And there, right there, that is an idea. Are you going to stop them from having anti-white conversations? I mean, that's a huge push from the Republicans right now. No. So my point would be it's the same either way. It's all an idea. It's all speech. Anti-white, anti-black, anti-anything, guys. The idea that, and we have the right to say you were gross for thinking that way. The idea that you can't, I mean, right now, that's why a lot of conservatives are uncomfortable, because they're going, wait a minute, you said America first, and the first thing you're doing is for Israel. What about the anti-white conversation that everyone's been? That should be a huge red flag. My point is none of that should be applied because all of it is protected speech. But what's happening here is he's making it about anti-Semitism. Therefore, what that is becomes it's a violation of rights. It is a violation of free speech. Now, what's interesting on top of that, HHS, GSA, and educate. That's the HHS. Where was that? Here we go. That's this. That's what this is coming from. That is RFK Jr. releasing this announcement. Additional measures to end anti-Semitic harassment on college. So why is the HHS even involved? The pandemic of anti-Semitism, guys. So just realize that's what this is coming from. So that's what they're all fighting on right now. to go after people's speech for Israel. And they didn't even find anything. Somebody needs to follow up on this. What they're saying is they're demanding they change what they're doing in regard to attacking people for one idea. No matter what you think about it. That is a violation. Now, Trump's administration demands included other things. Disciplining students involved in last year's protest. So see, this is somebody driving. They want people who stood up and crawled out Israel to be dealt with. Why does that sound like something Americans would support? You're getting a lot of rabid people who are caught up in the partisan agenda screaming, but the majority of this conversation, from what I can see, are people that are really uncomfortable with this because this is supposed to be what we stand up for. And it says Heinz Hall. Oh, and it says when students occupied the building and renamed it. Heinz Hall, meaningful discipline means expulsion. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. It's the way that Substack is weird. When we highlighted it, changes it doesn't matter for the podcast. That's why I've read it funny. That's one sentence. It says, when students occupied the building and renamed it Heinz Hall after Hein Rajab, God forbid, we talk about a child that was murdered by Israel that you are all supporting. Meaningful discipline means expulsion or multi-year suspension, the Trump administration said. Are any of these people going to be charged with a crime? Are any of them going to be shown to be acting violent in any way? They're having them removed. They're forcing this school to suspend or expel students for speech and then giving them $400 million if they do it. That seems like coercive, if you ask me. It seems like a bribe. Centralizing all disciplinary processes under the university president's office, and that's why I mentioned that. There's a reason for that. And empowering the president to suspend and expel students with an appeal process only through the president. Centralization of power seems to be their thing. Ban masks that are intended to conceal identity, intimidate others. Isn't that exactly what the left was doing? The point here, guys, why do we not see, under the guise of fighting what you think you're the Democrats with your masks, it's a right. Why would you not be allowed to wear a mask? It seems pretty stupid. I'm not talking about a face mask. I'm talking about whatever you want to wear. Or now what about Halloween? We can't wear a mask that day? It's a stupid argument. The idea is clearly you have a right to wear what you want. Now, yes, you can argue if you wear a ski mask, it's harder to see. Therefore, okay, so now you're just arguing that it's whatever's in the interest of the government holding us accountable. Let's make sure we do that. Who cares about rights? Obviously, I can acknowledge that masks like that are probably used more often than not in ways to conceal their identity for a crime or for manipulation. It doesn't change the fact that it's a principle that you are allowed to wear what you want. The moment you start allowing them to dictate these small lines is where they run with it. You give a mouse a cookie, they ask for a glass of milk. It goes on forever. It's an old book I remember when I was a kid. The point is, they ask for it never stops. You give them an inch, they take a mile, guys. That's what government does. And it says, with masked individuals having to wear their school ID outside their clothing. Formalizing a definition of anti-Semitism is what they're asking for. And guess what? Using the IHRA definition, that is the manipulation. Most Jews in the world are calling that out. That is them conflating Zionism with Zionism with Judaism. That's them saying that if you say Zionism committed a crime, that you're breaking the law or denying the Holocaust. Which, by the way, there's plenty of evidence to point out. The point is you have a right to deny whatever you want. That's what Norm Finkelstein has made a case on for a long time as a person who has history connected to it. He's not denying the Holocaust. What he argues is he will defend your right to forever. That's called principle. And yet they still pretend that he's trying to deny it in general. You should look into it all for yourself and decide for yourself. That's what we should all be doing. The problem is Trump's administration is now saying you're not allowed to think that, which may limit criticism of Israel, it says, and addressing anti-Zionism discrimination. So now you're not allowed to criticize a political group. That's like saying anti-Republicanism is a crime. It's insane, guys. Transparently insane. Implementing comprehensive admissions reform. Right, so all they're doing now is trying to control who is let into these colleges, largely probably based on some kind of overlap to what they're claiming is a problem, which I guarantee will lean into Muslim countries and specific support for groups they don't agree with. Which is all ridiculous. It's all against everything we believe in this country, or at least we pretend to. Placing the Middle East, South Asia, and African studies departments under an academic receivership for a minimum of 5 years, meaning taking over the department and installing a new department chair. You may be asking why. I mean, why wouldn't it be about, any other areas in the world? Clearly, because the people we're talking about have a very long-term and consistent agenda to control the way you understand things in those areas. Seems no big deal, right? Just trying to control what they teach, control who can say what, control where you can go, what you can wear, control who comes into the college, control what you can say about certain countries. But yeah, free speech, guys, freedom, right? We're winning. It's really not that hard to see. I just can't believe so many people are willing to try to die on this hill. Now, it says earlier Thursday, the university announced that it was issuing multi-year suspensions, temporary degree revocations, and expulsions related to Hamilton's Hall protests, already fulfilling one of the items on the Trump administration's wish list. At least 22 students were impacted by the disciplinary processes, according to the student organizers. 22 people. Any of them charged with a crime? Not that I can see. Welcome to Trump's America, guys. Well, really, the point is, welcome to the United States government that it's always been. But Trump just seems to be willing to tear that mask off. You can decide why. The shocking move is part of a wave of crackdowns on free speech against students and workers who have spoken out and protested for peace and against the war on Gaza, the union wrote. It is no accident that this comes days after the federal government froze Columbia's funding and threatened to pull funding from 60 other universities across the country. Now, you can go back to things like the Rockefeller, like the AMA and Rockefeller Medicine, and how they basically strong-armed these schools into only teaching their petroleum-based medical direction. That's the medical system we live under today, despite Rockefeller dying using a homeopath. Same thing here, guys, for a different reason. You are now stepping into this and dictating the next 100 years of educational direction because of a foreign country. It really is staggering to me how many examples we have of how obvious it is that something else is driving this conversation. Now, next, I'll include this for you too. Oh, and we went over this yesterday, but the overall point, guys, is to realize, so again, the dean of the central location of this conversation is a former Israeli spy, Al McLeod, Mint Press News. And the reality is not just that it was a spy, but she ended up marrying the UN Israeli representative. I mean, and this is the whole point about this. It's like, are we going to pretend that there's not some obvious interest there? It's not going to drive what she ultimately does. And let's also not forget that people in these positions have been forced out because they weren't censoring people. And now here we are. Now, this is important that I want to go over to end, like I said we would before. And this is about DOGE and basically everything we're talking about, and not just a violation of free speech, but the idea of the rapid, not dissolution, but the degradation, the collapse of, rather, I mean, this is what I want to say in the beginning, where it's more so the lack of acknowledgement for existing inherent rights. But it's everywhere, and it's not just the right situation. In this case, we're talking about basic transparency. So if we're talking about DOGE, and we already know this background conversation, he's an advisor, but he's not, it's this game. What they set this up so that this could be opaque. No ethics pledges, even though he's directly connected to Israel, just like Trump is, but we don't get to see why. We don't get the conflicts of interest. Everything about this seems set up to allow what's happening without anybody being able to know who's really driving this. Or at the very least, the possibility that something else is invested in this and we don't even know what's happening. And to have direct access to the largest databases in this government. I don't care if it's BlackRock, Palantir, or Israel. Any one of those things should be terrifying that this is happening without anybody being allowed to see it. Well, why I genuinely think that they're rolling out, and look, it's not my opinion. They've already rolled out a GSI, basically General Services Administration artificial intelligence bot. They're already using that. That was a public discussion. I'm worried how much they're actually rolling out and utilizing artificial intelligence to make these decisions today as a trial balloon. Now, we're going to go more into that when I go deeper into the Freedom City Prospero overlap, which I'm telling you is building right now. But I'll include this right here. We just did this show on the March 8th. And again, just because I felt like it was an important time to do it, while everyone's talking about other things, clearly this is becoming more relevant every day. The impending future of AI government and who controls the AI, who controls the AI. Important conversation. My point in this, though, is here we are. Well, they're actively trying to hide not just who's in control, who's making the choices, what's being removed, and getting caught lying everywhere about the contracts they claim ended, even though no, that one ended before Biden was ever in office. Oh, that one actually never ended at all. Here, they're still funding it. And I made this point last time. There are clear examples of funding things that the same side would call woke. Funding the Reuters Newswire, Politico even has one example that's still active. Didn't they just scream about why that was a problem? It only matters when they can make a case about it for one day. Or things that are related to climate change, literally say climate change, things were in Africa that are still being funded. Now, I'm not saying even good or bad. I'm just saying it shows you a willful ignorance when it comes to things that don't work for the agenda. Now, my point in saying all of that is clearly something is wrong right now. That's not a left or right point. It's an objective, nonpartisan, I care about this country point. And the reality here is that this judge, whether I guarantee that these people all have their partisan leanings, if not like maybe, I think everybody today in these positions are, whether they want to or not, are being like wildly incentivized, if not like driven to be politically motivated. That's just the reality where we are. I'm not saying it's good. I think it's horrible and it shouldn't be the way it is, but we all know that's where it is. Left and right, they all do it. So the point is, even with that, the system is still supposedly built in a way where where whether they're all politically motivated or not, they can all sort of challenge each other. Which, by the way, is more likely or not why we end up never doing anything, because everyone's politically motivated. And so everyone just kind of dunks on each other and nothing changes until executive order, Israel says. Different conversation slightly. The point here is that you can bank on the fact that she has political motivation. The problem is, even if she still has the legal standing to make her sentiment in this ruling. So, but then from there are other aspects that can supersede that. It's like the situation with Congress, okay? They're supposed to be able to allot the amount of money that gets spent, even though that's not even happening today. But ultimately, Trump has the power to veto things at the end of the day. He can fire people. They have to appoint them. There's clearly a way this is built to at least try to create checks and balances. So the problem is, even though they're politically motivated, what's happening today is these judges are challenging what Trump and Elon are doing. And so they go, get rid of them. And even if you can prove they're politically motivated, it is still the wrong direction to go in. It's still the centralization of power and removing any challenge to what they want. Now, even if she's doing this because of her own petty political view, I'm of the mind that they're doing it for a much worse reason. That's just my personal opinion. Either way, both of them are doing something wrong if that's happening. But here's what Nick Sorter had to say. Judge Tanya Chutkan has now ordered the doxing of DOGE employees. It's just such stupidity. Like at the end, I actually truly think this is willful dishonesty. Doxing is the action or process of searching for and publishing private or identifying information about a particular individual on the internet, typically with malice intent. When you're a government entity, when you're working, whether an advisor or not, and especially when you've got your fingers in read and write access on $6 trillion databases, we obviously have a right to know your name. And that's all they're asking for. And so they're turning this into asking for their name, really making it doxing. So a bunch of the followers online assume that what they're doing is trying to find out their address and where they live. That's not what's happening. You can read it for yourself. Now, of course, he doesn't post a link to the actual thing. He posts a screenshot. I'll give you the link so you can educate yourself on the lies that they're telling. The point here is she's demanding to see the actions that are happening. Now, whether politically motivated or not, how can you disagree with that? I want to see what's happening. Who's changing what emails are happening, what's going on, what's actually going on. And part of that is the names of the people involved. Not where they live or not their social security number, just what their names are. And the fact that we get so much pushback about just who they are is terrifying. And then they try to make it into doxing. And then based on this swatting and they're coming after everybody, they go, oh, they're going to kill them. They're trying to get them killed. Think about how irrational that response is to saying, I want to know the names of people that are involved in changing our government. Most transparent in the world, except we're going to attack you for asking their names. He says, after all the death threats received by Musk, which can we prove any of this? You know what I'm saying? Like just people I get death threats. Okay. Are we going to make the case that suddenly everything, the bottom line is that we can't verify any of the stuff that's happening. And even if he did get death threats, he's the richest, most known person in the world. That's probably not that uncommon. But he goes, and also shouldn't be disregarded. But you can't then claim that means we're not allowed to know the people who are making changes in our government. Again, either such uneducated opinion or a disprovably dishonest. and his personnel, and as well as their terror attacks on his Tesla showrooms. Oh, we know that now, do we? Now it's terrorism? Do we know who did it? Do we know why they did it? No, who cares? Let's let Nick tell you what he wants you to think for propaganda purposes. We are the media, guys. He goes, the leftists are trying to terrorize DOGE and its employees into submission. Oh, is that what they're doing? Do not relent. The American people have your back. And Elon and Big Balls. I'm just embarrassed some days for what people see us as. It's almost like the witch hunt to see people die. Aaron Elizabeth, by the way, has been like just sycophant constantly under everything Elon and Nick are. Oh, yay, we're the same. It's just, it's gross to me. It's all over the place. Well, this person says they are federal employees. We are all able to find this I guess you just typed it weird. They are federal employees. We are all able to found this isn't doxing. It comes along with being a public servant. He's right. Their information and salary levels should be able to be identified as mine is. Now, to be clear, as far as I can tell, she's not asking for anything other than the names. I'll read it directly from what he posts, and I'll give you the whole link. But this devolves in this back and forth. He goes, okay, so post your real name, address, phone numbers, and any other email addresses. See, this is not, if it's not dishonest, this is a very stupid person. Did he say, is that what's happening? Or are you just trying to make a very ridiculous point about what you demand about this guy because he's pushing back on your point? She's asking for their names. Are you saying that we don't have a right to the names of government employees? That's as simple as the conversation is. All federal employees are legally supposed to be on public record, this guy says. DOGE is working for the federal government, making them federal employees. Very simple. This person says, where's your link? Show me all your information. It's a dishonest argument, okay? It's insane how this goes. Now here is the document. Actually, I'll show you so you can see. This is what he's showing you. That's all you get. It's right there, page 8 of 14. I'll show you first what he wrote, or what he shows you right there. Here's what it says. Again, subject to a minor amendment, plaintiffs have sufficiently tailored their interrogatories and requests for admission as well. These requests, and there's people just seeking information about what DOGE is doing. Those requests seek to identify DOGE personnel and their parameters of DOGE's and must authority. A question central to plaintiff's claims. Now I'm going to read the rest of what he posted, but guys, that's it. Their personnel and their parameters of authority. For them to turn this into doxing or threatening, it just shows you how dishonest all this is, how desperate, which really, really raises red flags for me, that there is something here. That's my opinion, but realize why would they, I mean, they must know that honest people are going to go, well, you're an idiot. That's obviously not what it says. So what are they trying to hide? That's my opinion. I can't prove there's anything back there. What I do know is there's no ethics pledges, that there's very clearly compromising positions. There's conflicts of interest everywhere. They've been desperately trying to hide all of this stuff. They refuse to show their names. They won't even announce the administrator until it's forced through court. Something is going on. Now, maybe it's just because they just don't want you to see because they think it's all secret deep state stuff. I don't believe that because I'm convinced that they are absolutely part of what this is. Either way, it's something. This is not normal. And that's my problem with people like them, like Nick, who don't acknowledge that. Like at the very least, like I said before, stand up and say, yes, this is problematic. It raises red flags, but we all believe he's doing the right thing for the right reason. So let's just see how it plays out. That would be an honest response and really the only one you could give because you don't know. Nick doesn't know Elon. They're not hanging out every day, whether they've ever met each other. He doesn't know what he thinks and feels, even if they're best friends. He's telling you what he's told Elon thinks and what he's told they're doing. Because obviously you can't see by now, they are tapped into high-fiving the agenda. To know their personnel and the parameters of their authority. It goes on to say, please, it's referencing disc.x, blah, blah, blah. It says, defendants argue that the inner workings of government are immaterial to an appointments clause claim, which, quote, turns entirely on the authority for certain outward-facing acts. The court is not convinced, but that is a legal issue appropriate for resolution after fulsome briefing. They're just simply trying to argue that look, are you of the mind that the phrase inner workings of government are ever not supposed to be shown to you? Like even the idea of national security, I pushed back on this forever. It simply creates a level of opacity that they can put anything behind. So they're claiming we don't have to show you. But it says, at this stage, it is sufficient that plaintiffs' discovery requests intend to reveal the scope of DOGE's and Musk's authority. Defendants also attempt to reframe plaintiffs' interrogatories and requests for admissions to encompass mere advice and casual conversation. The court does not read them so broadly. For instance, plaintiffs ask defendants to, quote, identify all federal agencies for which DOGE personnel or Musk, 1, canceled or directed the cancellation of federal contracts, 2, terminate employment or placed on leave or directed the termination or placement on leave. So where does it end here for him? After that said, right there. Okay, so continuing. Or was it right here? So it goes on to say, casual advice would not be responsive. Nonetheless, the court will alter plaintiff's fourth interrogatory to avoid any confusion. As written, it asks defendants to identify federal agencies where DOGE personnel or Musk recommended cancellation of federal contracts. All they want to know is where he gave the so-called advice to make these changes. What there seems like they're getting at is the reality of the lie, that he's not an advisor. This guy is running the show, which technically is a violation of the law. The reason they made him an advisor is so you wouldn't be able to he wouldn't have to divulge conflicts of interest. He wouldn't have to show ethics pledges. He wouldn't have to show anything, which is terrifying, seeing as how he appears to be the most powerful person in the government. That's the whole point here. It's not partisan. It may be for them, but the objective reality is that's terrifying. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? And if you're willing to just accept that you trust him, that's your choice. Not everybody's choice that you make for us. But they're simply saying where and how these choices were made. And it says, as written, it asks to identify those choices, where he recommended the changing of these contracts. And when such action occurred, pursuant to the recommendations to DOGE or Musk. You see where they're going with this? And it says the court will strike recommended and recommendations and insert directed and direction. Meaning where they're getting to the point, obviously, where this is him making these things happen. And it says, that said, defendants may not creatively interpret the interrogatories to circumvent their discovery obligations. That's where his screenshot ends. Now, you want to show me where it asks for anything other than their names. And on top of that, you can read the whole thing, as I did, unfortunately, which is most of the rest of it is legalese. It is about exactly that. And you can see again, seeks to identify personnel. You know, it doesn't even necessarily say their full name. It just seems to say, who are they? That's it. Who is the person that is working in the parameters of DOGE's authority? To pretend in any world that is a violation, a stretch, a doxing, they are just muddying the waters for everything. How many times have we been saying this for years now? They get to a point to where everything means nothing and nothing means everything. So whenever they make a claim, it is what it is. No matter what the evidence, no matter what you can prove, because Twitter files, because people have been convinced that they're following the people changing the world. I sure would love if that was the case, but it's clearly not, based on 1,000 reasons. And even if it ultimately ends up, which I think is obviously not, what they're doing is going to guarantee that it never stays that way. That's probably by design, just in case they accidentally drive it in, my opinion. Oh, that's right. We just went over that. So going forward, here's what somebody else has to say. Liz Churchill, wow, she belongs in prison. Think about that. Think about saying someone belongs in prison just because they're a Democrat, because they wrote that we should know who these people are and what their authority is. It is kind of chilling, isn't it? Of course, they call me a woke Democrat or whatever because I'm simply being objective when it's, as always, the same thing David Icke said the other day. It's funny how you look at my opinion, it's been wildly consistent for a very long time, and how this kind of happens. During COVID, right? The Republicans were largely in support of me, and the Democrats were calling me a dangerous Nazi, and now it's the other way around. And it's just objectivity. Well, this is clown world. What the F? You know, it's crazy. Whether they read it or not, it doesn't matter. Now, here is what Newsweek had to say. Judge Chutkan strikes blow against Elon Musk's DOGE. And then I'll show you from Guardian or in the Gateway Pundit. It says, on Wednesday, Judge Chutkan granted New Mexico and 13 other states the right to obtain documents and answers to questions about DOGE's plans to trim federal agencies. Pretty simple. Can't believe anybody would argue that shouldn't happen, right? And again, I included the document. You can read all the way through it. No more than what we just showed you in regard to the names of the people or doxing. Now, it says the states are seeking a preliminary injunction against DOGE and to have its actions declared illegal under the Appointments Clause, the section of the U.S. Constitution that mandates how people should be appointed to high office. Now, isn't it interesting that that's not what they're focusing on? Seems like it is. It's the bulk. It's actually the thrust of what they're doing. They're trying to make this be ruled, which there's a fair case there, especially when they're not proving anything to anybody. Because you have to realize that this is not just if they want you to believe, like if we live in the world we pretend we do, it's always complicated because I don't even believe that. Then that means that there's not just one person making decision. That's not how this works. As much as they're all loving to pretend that Trump's the one, the democracy dictator, there's supposed to be a balance here of how this works. So what we're seeing, though, is that's not what they want. So they're going to do it all themselves and act like you're somehow breaking the rules by asking for information. But they want to declare what they've been doing illegal. I mean, technically, you could argue it literally already is. The section of the Constitution that mandates how people should be appointed. Now, it says, in their lawsuit, the states argue that Musk was illegally appointed and to call for the court to stop DOGE's drastic cuts against the federal government. Now, this is the first part that matters, which is why I think most of them aren't making a point about this, because I think that whatever the marching orders are is like, don't even mention this. Because the reality is that's the biggest central problem, because they tried to make it to where they could make him an advisor. And what was the other part? They basically, so not only are they hosting him out of personal locations and not using those transition offices or the servers, there was another aspect I'm blanking on right now, where basically they set it up to where he would not be accountable. Even though they give him all the power, they just pretend like he's only advising, and it's a game, it's a shell game. That's been very clearly shown. It's not a partisan thing. But look, you could argue that they did that to avoid the deep state. If you want to play that game, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it is still a problem, especially since you're assuming that that's why he's doing it based on what he told you. It says the lawsuit states that Musk was illegally appointed and calls for the court to stop their cuts. The lawsuit states that DOGE has spread chaos and confusion across the United States and describes Musk as an agent of chaos. Chutkan has denied that request on February. So did you hear? Just make sure you heard that. The judge that they're calling out for doxing, even though that's provably not what's happening, actually denied that request on February 18th, writing that she could not issue a temporary restraining order against Musk and DOGE, quote, without clear evidence of imminent irreparable harm to the states. So she literally erred on the side of Musk and DOGE because they weren't presenting enough evidence. And this is the person you call a radical I'm sure she is in some cases. But if she was a radical going after, she would have been like, good, do it. Because everything is right. No, she stood up and said, I can't do that. I deny it because there's not enough evidence. I'm not trying to defend anybody. I'm just pointing out the obvious that they're trying to hope that you don't even see. Or now that you point to Newsweek, they go, oh, Newsweek, Republican, Democrat. Now it says, if it is this potential evidence that the states are seeking to obtain with the discovery request. They asked Chutkan to compel Elon Musk and DOGE to comply with 5 requests for document production, 6 interrogations, 6 requests for admission, and 2 depositions. In her Wednesday ruling, Chutkan noted that the disclosure request, quote, generally concerned DOGE's and Musk's conduct in 4 areas: eliminating or reducing the size of federal agencies, terminating or placing federal employees on leave, canceling, freezing, or pausing federal contracts, grants, or other federal funding, and obtaining access, using, or making changes to federal databases or data management systems. Yeah, all very relevant, especially if there's more happening than just them trying to change the government, outside influence. Now imagine you only read what Nick sort of wrote and act like you know what's going on, right? We are the media, and you read this really, blatantly dishonest and one small part of what's actually being discussed. That's what you get in the partisan field, guys. And that's even corporate media half the time. Now it says, she noted that the plaintiffs do not seek emails, text messages, or other electronic communications between DOGE staff. So she's saying, we don't even want the emails and exchanges. We want who's being done and what their authority is. Imagine claiming that shouldn't be discussed. And here is the same document. You can read it for yourself. Here, I'll even show you this. So just think of the difference of reporting there. And it's not Newsweek is better. It's just this is basic. This is like the bare minimum of reporting. And even then, I could point out ways that I think Newsweek was kind of slanting it in their direction. That's what they always do. But comparing it to what Nick did is just like a cartoon versus at least, it's wild to me. Here it is right here. Again, subject to the minor, it's the same thing. So here is what The Guardian says. Judge orders Elon Musk and DOGE to produce records about cost-cutting operations. Elon Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, by the way, on that note, Derek, I think, just finished an article specifically about the efficiency push and whether that's simply like a pipeline to technocracy. That's going to be coming out tomorrow. as along with another part 2 from Zoe Smith, by the way, about the medical thrill kill cult, as she calls it with her book. Coming out tomorrow. Goes on to say, have been ordered by the federal judge to turn over a wide array of records that would reveal the identities of staffers and internal records. So their names, that's what they're talking about, to end efforts to aggressively cut federal government spending and programs. The judge the U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan's order forces Musk to produce documents related to DOGE's activities as part of the lawsuit brought by 14 Democrat states attorney generals, and alleges that Musk violated the Constitution by wielding powers that only Senate-confirmed officials should possess. Now, so do you disagree with that or not? Right? This is a core point. Do you disagree with the reality, whoever's behind it, that is what's happening? The Senate does have the approval on certain concepts, and whether they're confirmed or not is up to the Congress. For them to jump in and remove somebody based on their opinion would arguably be a violation of that process. But look, I'm not saying that's the case. This is actually an important conversation to have, because the reality is the executive branch does ultimately have a check here. But it's the way it's being done through the advisor, right? Through the opaque background. Like, there's a fair case to make here. I mean, all they would have to do would come out and just give them here's the names, here's the authority we're acting under. Okay, well, now we can see it. Now it looks like it's all in line. Now, they probably wouldn't do that since they're also politically motivated, but the rest of us would look and go, okay. That's where I would jump in and go, well, I think he's part of the problem, but that he's correct, and that's why he's okay. That's what objective and fact-based people would do. My feeling, as you know, is that there's more behind the story. And it's not just about showing that what they're doing is just Trump executive power. So ask yourself why we wouldn't just lay the case out and show that I think it's because there's more behind the story. Chutkan, in her 14-page decision, said that she was allowing that the state attorney generals to obtain documents from Musk to clarify the scope of his authority. Seems pretty simple, which would inform whether he has been operating unconstitutionally to the extent that DOGE's activities should be halted. That's exactly what I was saying. It's very clear. This judge also suggested the so-called discovery requests, which she limited to only documents and not even depositions, which they were asking for, could include the identities of DOGE staffers in order to establish the scope of the DOGE operation. Simple. Not personal identifiable information in regard to your personal life, but knowing your name and your position. That's what they're talking about. Like any other government people. Now it says Chutkan's order does not apply to Donald Trump. And it goes on to say, for weeks, Musk has taken great pains to conceal how DOGE operates, starting with his own involvement in the project. Musk himself, as a special government employee, which the White House has said means his financial disclosure filing will not be made public. Now, I guarantee you that was one of the earlier points in all of this. With Sean Diddy Combs in the background of Twitter, Saudi Arabian oligarchs, and who knows else, right? BlackRock. But obviously more. Those are generally public. Why would they not? I mean, this is important to think about. Or Trump or Bondi or different examples of the lack of ethics pledges. It shows you that there is something they don't want you to see. Now, it doesn't have to be Israel, but it's just obvious there's something that's being hidden here. And it says the White House then subsequently said in court filings that Musk was a senior advisor to the president, a designation that it claimed meant Musk had no actual or formal authority to make government decisions, even though it contradicted how Trump had spoken about it publicly and, by the way, in front of Congress, saying he was in charge. The issue at the center of the lawsuit is a provision of the Constitution that says government officials who act and wield power as heads of departments are principal officers, in quotes, who can exercise that authority only if first nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. That's how they're playing this game, guys. And if you want to try to die on the hill of just defending them because you're on their side, at least be honest about that. The reality is that the legalities of this seem pretty cut and dry. Now, the argument comes down to whether or not, there's two things really. It's about whether or not firing people would fall under their purview in the context of Senate confirmation, as well as the fact that he being in this position, whether or not he has authority and whether his decisions have been made without people. Like if he's alongside somebody with actual authority, whispering in their ear and they're calling things out, that would be reality, or what we claim, or what it's supposed to be and what they claim. If he's walking in with his group of 20-somethings and just ripping things apart, I think everyone's been calling this out. Then there's a very clear legal boundary being broken there. Okay, now let's look at, oh, and then just to include this, by the way, I mean, how many times did I say well before this ever came to pass that this was going to be important? Watch it again for yourself and realize that this never changed. And also, weirdly enough, I think not actually, I think it tells you everything. The Democrats did not stand up and scream about this. Why wouldn't they? Probably because they're also compromised by Israel. The point is that you literally have a low-hanging fruit. You're supposed to tell us that you're spent your life is dedicated to fighting the Republicans and Trump, and you have the obvious example that they are basically breaking the law, that they're not divulging whether they have conflicts of interest before taking the lead power, and nobody said a word. I mean, very few people. Think about that. And the main thing I said before, as the guy in the position said, they could be funded by a foreign government and we wouldn't even know. Pretty on the spot. Now this, I just have to say, this. I referenced this in the show yesterday, didn't get to it. I mean, guys, it's I'm not saying for a second that we should give credence or trust any of these platforms. All independent media, mainstream alternative media, that's the point. Question everything, consider everything. No way am I saying The Guardian or the rest are better. They're all propaganda in their own way. What's funny, though, is that at least you could look at some of the other platforms and see that they at least they try to give you that semblance of credibility, right? And at the very least, give you the breakdown. Well, I often point out, like, oh, here's where this is all true, and here's where they're trying to deceive you. That's what it's the most of the best deceptions have mostly truth, and they lead you astray right where it matters, right? This is how. Just think about what we just read, and now read what Gateway Pundit writes. Now they're one of the more kind of bombastic cartoonish out there, but realistically, it's just, this is mainstream alternative media for you. And it's left and right. This just happens to be this conversation right now about this judge, but it is really a partisan thing. And I got to tell you, like, this is like a sore thumb standing out. Here's how the title reads: Judicial Tyranny. Radical Judge Tanya Chutkan allows state's attorney general to unveil the names of DOGE employees. Radical judge, right? That's not pretty objective, right? On top of that, that's a government employee, and we have a right to know their names. It's very stupid that they're making this case. But here's what the article reads: Corrupt U.S. District Judge Chutkan has unleashed a legal assault on Elon Musk and the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency, greenlighting a phishing expedition that threatens to expose DOGE employees to the wrath of left-wing bureaucrats. On Tuesday, radical left Judge Tanya Chutkan, a disgusting, dishonest Trump hater who believes she was elected to lead this country and take down Trump, issued an order today in the state of New. You get where this goes. Now, there's an important point to make here. And if you're breaking down a report on something that's important like this, clearly that is a slant of your very clear personal opinion. Now, I all the time express my personal opinion, especially about people that I think are disgusting. But to be clear, if you watch this show, when we're discussing the facts, we're discussing the facts. And I'm not talking about radical, disgusting, dishonest people, unless I'm in the point where I'm saying this is my opinion or how I feel about things. What I'm trying to highlight here is there's a very clear line that has to be drawn. This is propaganda. This is radical, dangerous, dishonest. And, did you prove any of those things? On top of that, secondarily, when I'm highlighting for you what is disgusting and what is dishonest and going on to prove to you why it's actually a lie, very different. This is taking this out of context in order to argue that just because you are asking for information, which we just showed you, this is a radical. I mean, she probably, for all I know, she is a radical left person, whatever you think that means. It does not change the fact that that's what they're using to argue that what she's doing is wrong, even though technically it's not even illegal. It's not wrong at all. Maybe partisan driven. But on top of that, it's asking for information that we all have a right to. I mean, I really just think we're in a really dangerous time in this country, guys. And it is people like this who are acting like they're fighting for the things that we're talking about, while what they do in the moment is more destructive to these conversations than things I've seen in a long time. And it's getting out of hand. It goes on to say, demands that Musk and DOGE cough up sensitive documents and data within a mere 21 days, all to appease coalition Democrat-led states. I mean, it's just such a dishonest way to frame all of this. Whether it's partisan driven or not, she's asking for simply, and even I just showed you, she first turned it down because there wasn't enough evidence. Then went to say, no, not depositions, not even emails. I just want the scope of their authority and the names involved. And this is how they frame that. That means they either didn't even read the document, or they did, and they just choose to bombastically lie about it. Chutkan's order mandates that DOGE disclose sensitive information and internal documents to the court, by the way, to the court to verify the authority for other government officials. This is not they're just trying to manipulate people to see this as some kind of attack on the very things that they're actually trying to hide from you. Ruling sufficiently targeting parameters of DOGE's authority, an issue central to plaintiffs' claims. Why would we not know the parameters of their authority? Why is that a problem for these people? I think it shows you something huge. The decision dangerously opens the door, he writes, for politically motivated activists and partisan actors to weaponize personal information. Their name? I mean, think about that. If you're going to claim that your name being public and your position is somehow putting everybody has that, even average people who have a Twitter account, especially government employees who are required to do so. It says, what a sick and dangerous woman. That's my point. Why do we put up with this lawlessness by these judicial insurrectionists? They're all the same, guys. And then he cites Nick Sorter's tweet, which shows you that they're just basically handing off the baton. He shares a tweet, he makes an article about it. It's all based on the same misinformation. Now, a judge, according to Politico, orders the urgent release of DOGE records citing unprecedented power and unusual secrecy. Now, there's multiple judges in multiple contexts right now. It says U.S. District Judge Christopher Cooper, it's a different example, said that the vast and unprecedented authority of DOGE, formerly known as the U.S. Digital Service, that was the other example, by the way. They basically took an old group and didn't create a new one in order to basically supersede the process. Combined with unusual secrecy, which is patently obvious, warrant the urgent release of the internal documents under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, they're all focusing on Chutkan, but this is a different conversation. But you realize this is pretty obvious. And they're simply asking for information that we have a right to. It says, quote, the authority exercised by the USDS across the federal government and the dramatic cuts it has apparently made with no congressional input appear to be unprecedented. And he writes this in his 37-page opinion. It's the first significant ruling in a growing legal push to pierce DOGE's secrecy veil. I mean, it's so funny how, yes, these are political platforms, but it's obvious that they're not being transparent. And then for them to stand up and say we're radically transparent, it's just insulting that anybody can't see through that. And it says a decision that undercuts Musk's repeated insistence about the operation's transparency and the White House's refrain that Musk is simply a run-of-the-mill presidential advisor with limited decision-making authority. I don't think anybody believes that. Cooper said this representation is undercut by the weight of evidence that has trickled out of the courts in the news. The rapid pace of DOGE's actions, in turn, requires the quick release of information about its structure and activities. That is especially so given the secrecy with which DOGE is operated. Now, look, this stuff gets mired in court processes. Now, I'm going to get to next one of the most alarming parts, which is that they're literally ordering people to shred documents to the USDA or the USAID. That's happening right now in Trump's administration. It's incredible. This is, everything. This is, for some reason, I can't ever think of the best example. You know, they're calling something that it's not. They're as they're calling a spade a spade. Like, this is them calling a spade a heart. It's like this is the opposite. No matter what you can all see. Just saying, well, because Trump and Elon, therefore it's good. Even if every single thing they're doing, even a fraction of it, you would scream foul if it was a Democrat. My problem with this is that right now, because the process and the legal, they could go forward to where they finally rule, okay, show us, oh, too late, it's all gone. It's been deleted, it never happened. Because they're not keeping records. They already made that clear. I remember when Hannity asked Bondi, are the FBI using, I think it's the Privacy Act in regard where they're supposed to be documenting the actions they take, what they delete, what they move. And she said, oh yeah, they better. And no one seems to be asking that about this monumental change in a $6 trillion database. That's one of the many that they're not required to show you what just happened and where things moved to. I mean, my God, every time I think about that, it's so insane with all of the possible conflicts of interest you can't see and the obvious problem. Goes on to say, however, the judge also noted that the executive order that Trump signed creating DOGE, coupled with the public statements by the president and Elon Musk, reinforced the notion that the cost slashing operation was doing much more than simply giving advice. The Trump administration has housed the DOGE operation within the executive office of the president. That's also on purpose, in what appeared to be an attempt to shield it from FOIA requests. Why all this effort to hide everything around Elon Musk? That's such an obviously valid question. The Trump administration has also asserted that Musk himself isn't part of the DOGE apparatus, but is simply serving as a direct advisor to Trump. Every day it's some new, whatever they can say in that moment to make your attempted transparency not apply to the most transparent agency in the government. Cooper also offered some criticism of the way the Trump administration litigated the case, noting that its lawyers offered virtually nothing in the way of evidence about DOGE's operations or management. See, that's where Chuckin over here is saying we demand to know what's going on, which we all have a right to. Now, here's that one too, by the way, 37 pages. There's a lot of this. Here's the Hill. Judge finds Trump unlawfully fired head of Federal Employee Labor Board. Now, in no way am I saying that these things aren't, all of these are probably in their own right politically motivated. I don't think anything isn't in this country. The point, though, is that you should still read these things left or right and consider what it's actually saying and whether there's validity to it. As it says here, a federal judge ruled Wednesday that President Trump's firing of the head of the board that resolves disputes between the federal employees and the government was unlawful. I mean, this is one of the most obvious examples. I mean, obviously, if it's the person who is at the head of the group that's supposed to resolve disputes between Trump and his administration and the executive branch, federal employees, and the rest of the government, and then you don't like what he does, you get out of here, you're fired. Like, that's the whole point of how this is supposed to be a problem. Like, that is obvious. That's the same as them getting rid of the people or going after the judges and getting removed because they ruled against what they want. It's authoritarian. It's a dictatorship. It's what they're trying to show you here. Now, I'm not even saying, you could argue that what the person did here was somehow illegal, wrong, motivated. Like, then show us. Make the case, lay out the evidence, and let us, the most transparent government should very easily be able to make that case. Or is it just that you're firing people that stop what you want? Which kind of seems obvious. It says the government arguments paint with a broad brush and threaten to upend fundamental protections in our Constitution. But ours is not an autocracy. It is a system of checks and balances. Again, I could prove to you 1,000 ways in which that very system breaks all the time. But obviously you can see in ways that it does still, even if they're all driven politically, that seems like the only way it works anymore. Not that that's how we should want it, seems to be stopping people from taking more power. But if you get rid of it all, everything will rapidly centralize under this administration, which is what the team sport politics people want. But that's not in the interest of freedom or liberty or constitutional rights. Federal law protects FLRA members like Grudman from termination without cause. The White House did not, and this is what's even more interesting. So does everybody, for that matter, in the context of this. They have a right to know why they're being fired. It's pretty common in this country. And it says the White House did not purport to have cause when it fired Grundman in a 2-sentence email last month. And instead, like it has in other cases, contended the removal protections are unconstitutional. Basically saying the protections from him being removed without cause is unconstitutional. It's great. They're using the very argument in reverse. What's crazy, though, is that if you get a 2-sentence email saying you're fired, well, that's not even remotely meeting the threshold of what we're talking about here. But see, this is the kind of thing that they're almost getting off on, is Elon Musk and them going, get out of here. I'm in control now. Like, you couldn't have just taken a little bit more time to make it more fleshed out. Here's what's going on. Here's why. Because everything's under the guise that we're fighting the evil Democrats, so who cares? Law doesn't matter as long as we feel like we're dunking on the other side. A straightforward reading of Supreme Court precedent thus resolves the merits of this case, says the judge, arguing that that's not true, what they're saying. Now, here is a recent one from today, or late yesterday, actually. 2 judges in mass firing cases order Trump administration to rehire probationary workers for now. See, they're sticking their fingers in the spokes all over the place. Oh, we have to, look at this article. Jewish protesters flood Trump Tower lobby. Looks like they dragged them out. Which, I mean, again, arguably that is what you would expect in some cases. If you're disrupting if you own a business and people all sat in the way, I think you're within the law of saying they're trespassing, remove them, right? Then charge them with trespassing. That is what most of these protesters are willing to accept. But that's kind of the most you can get if you're peacefully protesting on the ground. They're now calling domestic terrorism. We just showed you that. It's dangerous, guys. Now, this one is especially concerning. This is from a Republican platform, the Daily Beast. Under red flag, Trump admin tells some USAID staff start shredding classified documents. Now, I'm going to show you the email. I'll even show you where the woman behind it defends this under the guise that, oh, no, it's just all procedural stuff. Well, how do we know that? Especially when it says it should be marked top secret. Daily Beast writes, a top official with the USAID has asked some of the organization's employees to start shredding classified documents. And if the agency's shredders become overburdened, to burn them instead. Literally not a joke. Here's the actual email. We'll go over it in a second. It's absolutely crazy. Can you imagine if this was a Democrat and what they would be saying? Because neither side knows. We don't know what they're back there hiding. That's why objective people go, wait, that's not supposed to be happening. Not my side can do it. Now it says on Tuesday, an email from Erica Carr, the agency's acting executive secretary, reportedly told employees to destroy, and we have the email right there, we just showed you, reams of sensitive documents and thanked them for their assistance, quote, assistance in clearing our classified safes and personnel documents. Sounds like something classified to me. And it says, according to NBC, which first reported the news, USAID employees were told to first shred as many documents as possible and then put them in burn bags, which the shredder became unavailable when it became unavailable. The order is an unprecedented deviation from the agency's standard procedure, which has long been that documents are only shredded when the embassy is under attack or during serious emergency scenarios. Now, I'm willing to bet that's never been followed. I'm willing to bet that whatever side of the government or just your government is there, that they would do that when they want to. The point is not about only Trump or only Biden. The point is that at this moment, your government is shredding information and acting like they're doing the right thing. That's why it's always so infuriating for people to try to make it about I'm not one side or the other. That's why I can objectively say that anybody doing this would be a problem, which kind of, that's why most of these people have a hard time pushing back on it because they look stupid. Like when you try to engage with this and you go, well, you're all being played by the two-party illusion. They don't know what to say to that. The reality is it shows you that objectivity is clear here. Why would you think it's okay? Do you know what they're shredding? Did Trump call you? And if so, you trust what he told you? The bottom line is we don't know. And all that we know is that they're shredding documents of information at a place that's been a massive transition of power. Doesn't that scream red flag? I mean, it's exactly what it is. Choosing to trust them is your prerogative, but it's not an honest stance. It is a willful ignorant stance, even if it turns out to be right because you didn't know. The order is an unprecedented deviation. It says, but Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly said in an X post, that's what I just showed you, the documents involved were old, mostly courtesy content from other agencies, and the original still exist on classified computer systems, which as far as I can tell, hasn't been verified. And even people in this conversation have pushed back on that. Like the reality being, the idea is clearly that we can't, actually take a step back. The point is that right now, these documents represent something that can be like the digital side of this is at this point far harder to keep accountable. It's very easy to manipulate that background. I think what they're doing is getting rid of information that proves, this is my opinion, that not only that there are this is a whole of operation here. That's a left and right all through Trump's last administration that they've all been using this for the same things. They need people to think this is a one-sided game, so they don't want this information getting out. Because look, there are still people back there that might leak some of this. That's what I think. Either way, nobody should be okay with this rapid destruction of evidence without knowing what's really going on, while there's no transparency and people aren't even doing what they're supposed to in most contexts. And while there's very obvious influence of foreign countries. I mean, how do we not know that's exactly what this is? Highlighting the USAID regime change engine for Israel or for China or for Russia. I mean, obviously these things could be possible. And it says some foreign policy experts were suspicious that it could be that Trump was simply trying to evade the law. Many of the documents show how funding was authorized and appropriated, likely making them crucial evidence in a number of court cases challenging DOGE's draconian cuts. He added that under normal procedures, the documents, quote, should be preserved until the funds are fully expended. Okay, so what's different now? Why wouldn't that be the same case? That's the point. There's a deviation here. Why? The American Foreign Service Association also noted that it was alarmed by the order, adding that the documents are important to ongoing litigation, quote, regarding the termination of USAID employees and the cessation of USAID grants. So exactly what they're doing seems, so they're destroying relevant evidence to what they're doing right now. I mean, are you really going to believe that it's because they're just running out of space? Seems a little convenient, doesn't it? At the exact moment when they need to hide what they're doing. Now it says, these are not the actions of someone looking for true waste, fraud, or abuse, said, what was that, Kel McClanahan, a director of the law firm focused on national security called National Security Counselors. This, quote, this is slash and burn mode and not leaving any evidence behind that could disprove their narrative. Now that's what anybody objective would say. If you was apolitical and you didn't even know who was involved, if all you heard was a government is destroying all the paperwork in their office, you wouldn't go, oh, they're just cleaning up to get ready for the next one, right? Everybody you'd go, that's pretty suspicious, because it is. But not if you're a Republican now in the MAGA movement, or rather Team Sport Republican. So here, Anna Kelly, White House Deputy Press Secretary, says the USAID building will soon be occupied by CBP. This was sent to roughly 3 dozen employees. The documents involved were old, mostly courtesy content. That was what they were saying earlier. More fake news hysteria. Well, she didn't prove anything. She pushes back. So evidence shows they're burning documents, and we're concerned about why. Not that we know for sure. And her thing is to go, it wasn't what you think. Fake news. Isn't that what you guys made fun of on the Democrats for doing the same thing? Always hypocrisy. The point is we still don't know. And why you would take a government official's word who has an interest in whatever's going on is beyond me. But you can see here, USAID staff have been instructed to clear out classified safes. I'm going to read you directly from the document. And this is USAID email that the Secretary of the White House just confirmed is accurate. It says, thank you for your assistance in clearing our classified safes and personnel documents from the RRB. The event will take place all day tomorrow, March 11th. So arguably already gone, right? Please meet at the RRB 14th Street lobby at 9 a.m. However, if you cannot be there at that exact time, your badge will be programmed for access to your work area. It says shred as many documents first and reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break. That's crazy. Then it says, if you need to use the burn bags, do not overfill. And ensure that the burn bag can be closed with staples at the top. Here's what's important, I think. The only labeling required on the burn bags are the words secret and USAID, and that looks like B/IO, in dark Sharpie if possible. If you need additional burn bags or Sharpie markers, please let us know. Let the InfoSec team know. I mean, guys, secret, non-important classified secret documents, right? I mean, this is so silly what people are willing to buy. Now, I'm not claiming that I know for sure either. Maybe they use those words and they're wrong. But the point is clearly that this is a red flag, like 1,000 others right now, slapping you in the face. Swamp says, understand, trust is in short supply. Now, I get the sense this person is in support. Yeah, it's MAGA, Trump, right? This is important. He says, understand, trust is in short supply. We've become accustomed to acts of treason being committed by government workers and not being prosecuted. Yes, from all sides. And he goes, that will improve when and if we start seeing justice served. So here's my point, guys. This is a person who's clearly MAGA, patriot, but has, based on this post at the very least, seems to be pretty balanced. Whether or not they support Trump, they're going, God, look, until we get clear justice served, then we're not going to one of their own administration's people, but has 2,000 followers. So these are the people that their voice doesn't make it into the majority conversation that the partisan people want you to think is happening. I just think it's important to think about because that's the truth right there. Why? We're not going to take your word for it. That's just stupid. Here's another one. PT Ward says, you need to understand that this is mostly Republicans that care, that this is mostly Republicans that care about the information held in this building. Right? Because right now, what about all the evidence of what they've been doing? You're going to burn all that? What about the evidence of Ukraine and the Bidens, right? I guess we don't get to know anymore. We just take their word for it. He says, this was an agency that stonewalled Congress for years and resisted every bit of accountability that was demanded of it. Can you understand why this would be a concern for people? Now realize also during Trump's last administration, it's not a partisan thing, but his point is still the same. These are people that are on their side. They're going, guys, do you not realize why we can't just trust? Good. I'm so glad that this is why I think most people, I don't often show these points. That's why I think most people see this on all sides. Now, here's an interesting overlap. On the 11th of March, very suspicious about this accountant general, Mike Benz, says, and it goes back even more, this is a 5-alarm fire right now as we speak today. USAID is shredding burning documents, citing Politico. He says the key information needed to reconstruct history is the information they're shredding. Okay, so right, that's Trump's administration shredding documents. This is a person they appointed at the head of the agency. It's not hard to see. Yet people are trying to make it about somehow a secret Democrat or some deep state. Well, okay, fine. If you think that, then why did Trump appoint these people? Why is it under their control? Why is Rubio overseeing this? It's willful ignorance. And he says, I'm trusting Politico here, which I don't like to do. It's just funny. Why would you trust Politico? Question it, consider it. Same point as always. There's an interest, that's why. He says, so the current acting executive secretary of USAID who ordered the mass shredding and burning of papers today worked in the Obama OPM. Okay, there we go. It's all because it's tied back to some connection to Democrat administration. What is that even relevant when it's been under the Trump administration? You guys can't keep sidestepping the reality of what's happening under their authority. I just think it's wild how easy it is to just go Democrat. Same thing they do in reverse. It's all of them, guys. Your government. It's a whole thing. The reality is, no matter how you spin this, this is currently under his administration. Are they jumping in and stopping it? No. This was the 11th. As far as I can tell, this is continued. Why isn't Rubio and the rest going, we've been screwed. They're not on our side. They're shredding documents. It's a crime. I'm not seeing that. Don't you think that's strange? Clearly, you can't just pretend it's some secret Democrat if that's not even what the administration is saying and if they're behind the action. Also, it says Erica Carr does not have a Twitter account. So unlike virtually every other senior Trump admin official, there's no way to directly petition their accounts for answers. And Sam Husseini logically says, why was Erica Carr allowed to do this? Heck, why is she still atop the USAID? Hard to believe it's not with tacit approval of Rubio and the White House. This was on the 13th. It's now the 14th. You mean, let's pretend, what are you going to give them a month to make a case about this? The reality is clearly there is an effort right now to hide stuff from every angle. That can't be unseen. It's everywhere you look. Whether you want to pretend it's to fight the deep state and hide what they can do, fine. Make up whatever narrative makes you feel better. Still acknowledge that there's level of secrecy that shouldn't be allowed. Anyone serious parse this out, he says? It's crazy. Sam always on the pulse. The Libs of TikTok says Senator Josh Hawley calls for investigations into the dark money groups funding violent protests across the country. He's talking about the campus conversation yet again. Now, none of them can acknowledge that these are Jewish organizations, or while they call them anti-Semitic Muslim terrorists. But what's crazy to me is that this is so lazy. We've gone over this forever. Whether it's the Soros side of things or the point is that there's funding on left and right that do the same things. This has been documented for so long by honest independent media. This self-serving game where team sport politic grifters pretend this isn't an obviously whole of government manipulation is just juvenile and dishonest. Both sides of the U.S. government, or to be objective, critically thinking people, your government, do this regularly. But they want you right now to get on this bandwagon about going after the people they direct you at, they sick you at. Look at these people screaming things they're allowed to say with free speech. I'm a bad guy. Shut it down. Financial Times reports that Elon Musk cuts fail to stop U.S. federal spending hitting new record. So to put a cherry on the top of it all, the evidence currently doesn't mean it won't change in a month. But right now, despite all the hype and claim about what they've been slashing left and right, they hit a new record for federal spending. Elon Musk's hyperactive efficiency drive failed to prevent U.S. federal spending rising to a record of $603 billion last month. Well, pretty sure we can point out the obvious expenditures there, whether they shave off $1 million and $1 million there and pretend like they're saving the world. The reality is they're still dumping money in Israel's hands. They're still dumping money into their mRNA and AI projects. Clearly, this has to matter. Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency claims to have already made more than $100 billion in savings, but only a handful of departments registered any decreases in the first full month of the new administration. Spending rose by $40 billion compared with the same month last year. on a like-for-like basis, a 7% increase. Now, the links are all in here. Check it for yourself. DOGE savings are so small as not to be identifiable in monthly spending totals, said Jessica Reidel, economic policy expert. Says Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, oversaw a cut in spending at the USAID, whose monthly outlay was revealed to have been halved at $226 million, compared with $547 million. So right there, they have been cutting contracts from USAID. I pointed that out as well. But I also showed you how things are being shuffled around and new contracts are going out, new spending is going different places. On top of that, they're still funding things that you claim we're stopping. But the real point, if we're talking about billions, if not trillions in debt, and we're trying to tout $200-something million as the end-all be-all of change, you're being played. Now, overall, like I said to begin with, the real point is we don't know. We have to wait until, at the very least, give them a year to see how this plays out. At the very least, then, 4 years, we know at the end point whether this was even real. I'm not saying I would never say that before an election process. Let's see if it works out. Challenge it every way, every single step of the way. Ask for evidence every single step of the way. My point is that once it gets to a year, there will be plenty of time to then be able to say, okay, they're either actually slashing funds or not. That's what I'm saying. Right now, I already think it's clear that that's at the very least a game that's being played. But of course, I could be wrong. It says, however, this saving was dwarfed by the consequences of a mere 3% rise in monthly healthcare spending, which costs an additional $5 billion, right? So here's $200 million saved, but just a small aspect here in one section raised $5 billion. A 6% rise in Social Security outlays cost another $8 billion. On Monday, the Tesla boss said he would seek to intensify DOGE's efforts, doubling its current staff and taking aim at large sources of expenditure such as Social Security. The Treasury's own direct spending soared by $29 billion since the same month last year, largely driven by a $10 billion rise in monthly debt servicing to $86 billion and a $14 billion rise in tax credits and associated payments. Trump has moved in recent days to restrict some of DOGE's activities, telling Musk in front of the cabinet that individual agencies are ultimately responsible for personal decisions within their departments and urging the billionaire to use a scalpel instead of a hatchet. Personally, I think that's just making a public statement to add to the court document conversation, right? Say, see, I publicly said that Trump, he's not actually in charge. What matters is what's happened and the actual evidence of like what he's directed, what they've done, and where it came to pass. So far, even if they now go forward acting like he's just an advisor and make sure they legally do it right, there's already a lot out there that can prove that they broke the law. But maybe Trump is just realizing that it's not in his interest anymore. Maybe he's realizing that Elon's not doing the right thing. Who knows? So he said that publicly. That's all we know. And it says the move came after several Republican lawmakers criticized the speed and breadth of DOGE's cuts, which have led to employees at various agencies having to be rehired for critical projects, including nuclear safety. I mean, we've seen like 4 examples of that, guys. So at the very least, you know that they're being haphazard if they're letting people go and then rehiring them, which is wasting resources. Overall, honest, objective people can recognize that right now it's not looking good for what they promised. I mean, there's 1,000 things. Let's be accurate. I mean, I can point out probably 10 different things that we've already seen them not follow through on. And I mean things that have gone the other direction. Israel, things like that. Funding of the wars, many different examples. Even the people in his administration, for crying out loud. But the point is to try to, I mean, look, what they're doing, if you believe in them, could ultimately end up positive. I always hope that's the case. The amount of red flags clearly indicate there's a problem here. Now, to end, just a couple of things over the larger conversation that shows you that this is going still, and I think, a very dangerous direction. This was from, this is yet today, actually. Enough is enough. Greenland flatly rejects Trump's calls for annexation. So we'll see what happens there, but realize this turned into you're being trolled, it's all a joke, to actual action. And let's also, I'll include this as well. What was it? Oh, that's what it was. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorsed the North American Union. Now, this is important because that's what this ultimately is. From Canada and Greenland and Mexico and Panama, it's all part of what this comes from: the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Plan, and the New World Order map. I don't mean that like just one map, but the point is, like, you can see these discussed in the past around what people have projected to be this New World Order outline of these different sections That's what this is. People like Alex Jones used to call this out constantly until it actually started to happen, and then they started pretending like it wasn't there. Very telling, if you ask me. The point is that this is not going in the direction it seems that they at least claimed it was, but who knows? Maybe it really is still a troll, like maybe it's all meant to make you look over there. The point, though, is that these things have real world consequences, like we're going to show you with the Canada part. But I want to keep you updated on whatever this is. Now, this one says from NBC, Trump White House has asked U.S. military to develop options for the Panama Canal. Now, see, even right there, if you want to say, oh, he's just trying to make them respond and he's doing this to get them to do, okay, fine, maybe you're right. But realize that this is threatening to people. It's bully tactics, right? It's honestly pretty childish, if you want my honest opinion, or even in an adult worldwide sense. What you're doing, people laugh at this stuff. Even if you have power, it makes you look weak when all you're doing is strong arming and in many cases not even getting what you want. But it says potential plans range from partnering more closely with Panama security forces to a less likely option of U.S. troops seizing it by force. Imagine imagine saying that as if it's a binary, like, maybe just taking it, maybe just robbing them of their things, or maybe making a deal. We'll see how it works out. just rampant lawlessness, guys. Might makes right. It's insane. I mean, this is imperialism, naked imperialism. It's all over the place. The Mirror writes that furious Trump declares state of emergency and doubles tariffs on Canada. Now, apparently this went rapidly through this couple of days period. Went on Canada in a ballistic 338-word rant. The point, though, is case of the emergency declarations are like nothing today. And it's everywhere you look. But this was about the back and forth. Now, it then went to, and this is on the 12th, Canada to impose 25% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion worth of U.S. goods. So this is my point. Even if it was a tactic to get what you wanted, it's spinning out of control because the game is being played. And who suffers? Canadians and Americans. Never the elitists, never the oligarchy, the average people, as they battle back and forth with their economic warfare. Then, this is on the 13th, Trump threatens 200% tariff on EU, wine and liquor, says the world is ripping us off. And maybe they're right. Maybe we're all being screwed. But the way he's doing this is just trying to be, it's boisterous, it is loud, it is clumsy, it is threatening, instead of trying to make deals with people or just simply, aren't the support base of Trump the ones arguing that we should go back to America first instead of trying, everything about this is not about trying to it's about trying to control the international dynamic for your benefit. Now, many people argue, yes, good, we should just make it make it work for us. Now, I get the logic of thinking that you should get your side, but if you stand back and look at the bigger picture, this is not asking for some kind of balanced situation. Quite the opposite. In everything he's doing, you can look at look at the way they respond. They're responding to it like you're a bully. And let's go into the foreign policy part of it. And here's Iran, as we told you, right? Trump says, if you don't do that, we're going to go after you, which is, it's like, okay, why would anybody respond to that? Trump would say, why would he respond to threats? He wouldn't. He would say no. So why would you expect them to? So Iran responded to his threats of do what we want or else. And they said, Iran says it will begin nuclear talks with China and Russia and tells Trump, do whatever the hell you want. And they did. Now they've met with China and Russia and they're discussing their nuclear talks, boxing out the United States. And I'm sure they'll make that into whatever they want it to be. That probably was the whole point. Russia said it's ready to discuss peace initiative on Ukraine with the United States as early as today, so the 13th. Another situation that rapidly boiled out of control. Okay, then the aide for President Putin dismisses what was presented, which was a short-term ceasefire, which is exactly the game they're playing in Gaza. We just give us a small pause, saying that it was nothing but a temporary respite. All right? Why would we give you a small pause? So you could regather, because the point is it's not going to go away, despite Alex and the rest telling you it already ended, like we defeated ISIS, because Trump said. The evidence clearly seems to suggest, I don't know for sure because it hasn't happened yet, and I wouldn't be stupid if to claim we know without happening, but the evidence clearly suggests that this is not going away. With their mineral deal, which is far bigger than a mineral deal, which shows you an interest in forever occupation. But then it goes further. Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees that fighting in Ukraine must end, but says the plan has to lead to long-term peace and remove the root cause of the crisis. Okay, so if Trump actually wants to make this happen, it's just not that difficult to make an actual lasting peace negotiation, which would clearly, in the eyes of probably more Democrats, benefit Russia to a way that point is obviously this has all been criminally manipulative towards Russia from these powers, including Israel, the United States, and the UK. But my point, though, is remove the root cause. So I don't know exactly what he might mean by that, but you could argue Azov movement. So that would be whether or not they want to remove their player from the area, which I doubt they'll want to. Israel won't let that happen. So I don't think this is going to happen. That'd be my argument. But this was from 4 hours ago. Then Putin rejects the ceasefire. Now, but again, this is an ongoing thing. This is 3 hours ago. So for all I know, since then, they've made another agreement. But the reality is it shows you that it's ultimately about the interest of the United States at the benefit or the expense of everybody else. And so they want something that gives them some interest, which I think shows you that ultimately they means they don't want this to end. But we'll have to see what happens. But what I want to show is that the way, if you negotiate from a stance of force all the time, there's no respect there, first of all. Secondly, if it's all kind of an illusion, then people don't take you seriously. Now, I'm not talking about kinetic power. Clearly, the U.S. military has a lot of kinetic power, but there's a much different world taking place today. Now, lastly, this says CBS News reports the Trump administration is placing more restrictions on the oil, gas, and banking sectors of Russia. Okay, so now you see where this begins to happen. So this is now being coerced, right? As always. Now, why would they respond to that? Why would they make a mutually beneficial agreement to end something they both want to end, if that's really the case, if all you're doing is going, fine, we're going to sanction you until you give us what we want? It's economic terrorism. But of course, don't worry though, guys, because Trump put on Truth Social, our economy will boom like never before. So we're all good, right? Everything's fine because Trump said so. I mean, therefore I am says, let's go. I mean, you're literally watching a lot of really bad things happen, but he said so. That's always the point. It's a meme world we live in, apparently, and people in the partisanship only look, I guess, as far as their phone. But lastly, of course, to bring it all the way back to Tesla from the beginning, this is from yesterday. Tesla warns it could face retaliatory tariffs, which I just think is hilarious. How this all swings around and bites them in the butt because there's not even much forethought to all of this, I bring it back to the reality that there is clearly somebody out there that wants to see this country fail, that wants to see this country collapse for a larger agenda that clearly they think Trump's a part of. And you just wonder whether all this chaos, all this destruction, all this dismantling of foundational American ideas might just be in the interest of somebody else. But maybe it's in the interest of the people that are doing it for their own short-term benefit. You never know. The reality is, if you're honest about all of this, this is not what you were promised. It's as simple as that. Thank you for tuning in today, guys. Shorter than some we've had, but ultimately glad it didn't take as long as some of them had in the past, but important to talk about, right? I mean, I'm sure this is not going to be over in the conversation of whether it's Khalil or other green card holders or visa holders being, ignoring their constitutional rights, or when this seems to inevitably move over to an American. I mean, I don't see how that doesn't happen unless we stop it, unless we stand up and do something to stop it. And that requires Americans, left and right, standing together, saying that we don't care what side you're on. We demand that you acknowledge and respect our inherent God-given rights. Simple. I mean, it really is the most simple part of this conversation. And this is cut and dry. And I almost think that they're using something like that instead of, like Candace said, going after somebody that actually provably did a violent act, because this is about destroying these things. This is about not just destroying it, but showing Americans, whether or not our government says so, that this is that. So it's like as usual. It's kind of like the revelation that they want you to see that that's control that they have. And they're just bringing this down, holding the reins of these politicians and bringing this down right in front of you in ways that you're going, but obviously that's free speech. And you have the very people pretending to fight for that going, it doesn't matter. You can't say these bad things. No hateful words. Just like the left was saying. How do you miss this? Thank you for tuning in, guys. Please share this with other people. Clip this out. Tag me. I'll share it myself. Thank you for tuning in. As always, Question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.